Chapter 1646, Summit Giant. Ling Han had a pleasant and wonderful night. He and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden were lovey-dovey and hands-on with each other, and with his tireless effort, he unlocked a few more positions with the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, which intensified his interest. He really wanted to have a more in-depth study of the subject with the heavenly phoenix divine maiden in the Black Tower. Unfortunately, they had not come here on a romantic retreat. After a night of rest, all of them were energized. The spiritual qi here was really too dense. Even if only a single day had passed, their improvement was still obvious. They continued their journey. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Because there were no longer any attacks from demonic beasts like the Black Panther, they were not delayed. Their speed was still very fast, and they could finally see the summit by the 4th day. Being able to see the summit and arriving at the summit was naturally two different things, and when they saw the summit, all of them were stunned. That was because this mountain peak had actually been severed in half. From the part that had been severed, it could be deduced that there should still be a very great distance until the non-existing mountain top, so when this mountain had been whole, just how tall would it have been? This was too astonishing. Ling Han and his group all shook their heads. They had never seen any mountain peak in the immortal realm that could reach such a height. This was practically melding a great star into the shape of a mountain peak. When this thought streaked through their minds, they all started, and then exchanged a look. This was not impossible. From afar, they could already feel the pressure that emanated from the summit. That was a stronger aura than a saint's. There was merely a slight wisp, and it was enough to make them feel as if their saintly bodies were about to crumble. Long Xiangyuan naturally couldn't bear it, and Long Yushan drew her inside her spatial god tool. After they traveled to a higher level, even the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, the notionless saint, and Long Yushan could not bear it any longer. They could only stop and watch as Ling Han continued to ascend the mountain. Ling Han traveled for several thousand miles, and his footsteps were also beginning to slow down. Now that he had come this far, even he dared not make any large movements. The pressure here was too terrifying. Thus, the slightest breeze could turn into a frighteningly destructive blade of wind. With one strike from this blade, even Ling Han's skin would be sliced open. Thankfully, his godly bones were even sturdier, and this was not enough to kill him. The indestructible heaven scroll circulated, and he healed his injuries as he continued his way up the mountain. He was an extremely curious person, and was determined to see what was exactly there on top of the mountain. He traveled for another 1,000 and more miles. Ling Han took every step with great difficulty. Even the weakest footstep could create a frightening blade of wind that would shatter his godly bones upon first contact. He could only make it this far. Ling Han stopped, and focused his origin power completely on his eyes. The Eye of Truth activated, and he looked towards the summit. With his present cultivation level, the Eye of Truth was actually not very useful anymore. But no matter what, it was still a mystical power, so using it would still definitely be slightly better than not using it. Far in the distance, the scene that was initially vague slowly became clearer, and he could just barely make out something there. Ling Han narrowed his eyes. His sight penetrating such a pressured space would have great negative effects on him as well. He felt a great pain in his eyes, as if he was about to be blinded. He did not give up. Instead, he focused even more origin power into his eyes. Humph! He suddenly turned around, and tears of blood were actually streaming from his eyes as he felt a sharp pain in them. He hurriedly channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, and under its repeated healing, he finally felt that his eyes had recovered slightly. However, he had ultimately glimpsed the scene at the mountain top, though it was just a single glimpse. Where the mountain peak was broken off, there was a black-colored rock. There was no tree nor a single blade of grass, and in the most central position of the broken peak, a person was seated on the ground. He was incredibly tall as 3,000 meters, his whole body green as if he was a tree himself. This person was extremely strange. The upper half of his body was indeed human in form, yet he had a pair of massive bull horns, but from the chest downwards, he had the form of a deer, with an additional 4 limbs. Whether it was the deer part or the human part, they were covered with multiple green-colored seals that exuded an endless air of life and vitality. Yet this person was dead. There was a hole in his forehead. It was not very big, possibly about as wide as a single finger's width, but it was this hole that immediately drew Ling Han's gaze. Though Ling Han had only caught one glimpse, he had spent half of it on looking at this injury. It seemed to have an endless attraction to him, and he couldn't help but stare at it. And it was this hole that had taken the life of this green-colored giant. Having his spirit pierced, so what if his body was still unscathed? This giant with the body of a deer had a green-colored blood flowing from him, and it was this that nurtured all the plants that covered the whole mountain. Perhaps the forest of the whole mountain range had been nurtured from his blood. This person had to have cultivated wood element regulations, and that was why his vitality seeped out, and turned this mystery realm into an ocean of vegetation after he had died. Of course, it was also because of him that such pressure that even saints could not possibly approach the summit filled this area. Ling Han recalled the last detail that he had seen. It was not that there was completely no vegetation on the mountain top. There was actually an incredibly small plant by the side of the giant with a deer's body. It was less than a foot tall, and had sprouted a verdant fruit. He did not know what fruit it was, but he was absolutely sure that being able to grow in such an environment, it definitely had to be celestial medicine. Unfortunately, he could not obtain it. Ling Han sighed. This was really too cruel. The celestial medicine was right in front of his eyes, yet he could only look at it helplessly and sigh. However, he was a man that could go with the flow. Immediately, he turned around, and headed down the mountain. The most important goal for him now was to find the Empress and the others. When he found them, then he would consider how he was to obtain that celestial medicine. Ling Han turned around and left, but he had not traveled very far when he got a very strange feeling. He stopped, and this kind of feeling abruptly vanished. He set out again, but it was only a while, and the strange feeling had returned. He swiftly walked down the mountain, and the farther he went, the weaker and weaker the blades of wind became, which allowed him to use movement techniques and not be sliced into pieces by those wind blades. He used lightning flash, and his speed reached the true limits of the immortal realm. His speed could match the speed of a heavenly tribulation. And as expected, that strange feeling disappeared once more. He stopped and thought, could it be that there is something following me? Otherwise, there was no other way to explain that strange feeling. He once again set out, but not too much time had passed, and that feeling actually came back again. Ling Han suddenly turned around, but there was absolutely nothing behind him. There was only a wide expanse of trees, and that strange feeling had again vanished at the same time. This was too strange. Ling Han turned back around, and walked at a very slow speed. After he had walked for at least 30 minutes, he suddenly made a rapid turn, used lightning flash, and streaked in the direction behind him. In that instant, Ling Han's expression involuntarily became incredibly strange because he finally discovered the source of that strange feeling that he had been getting. He had indeed been followed, but the culprit was not a human, nor was it a demonic beast. Instead, it was a bone. It was more than a foot long and completely snow-white. It stood upright as if it had 2 legs, and the instant it saw Ling Han swiftly return, it actually looked like it was about to turn and break into a run. Chapter 1647, Bone. A bone as white as jade was actually following him. Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. This was really too ridiculous. Furthermore, this bone was really too human. It actually knew to hide from him, and it really had hidden successfully. If Ling Han had not turned around all of a sudden like this, he definitely would not have been able to seize it. Had it come alive? Ling Han descended, and was only about 3 meters away from that bone, but he did not make a move. Even if it was only a bone, he could still feel a terrifying aura from it, so he did not dare to make any rash movements. The bone also seemed to be looking at him. Then, it shook its body, and actually slowly buried itself in the ground as if it was going to pretend that Ling Han had not discovered it, and was planning to make its getaway. "Hey, I saw you." Ling Han declared with a smile. Otherwise, he really didn't know what kind of attitude he should adopt towards such a strange bone. The bone suddenly popped back up, as if it had gotten a scare. It could be seen that its body had actually bent, clearly expressing its shock. This. Ling Han began to break out in a cold sweat again. Could anyone tell him what was going on exactly with this bone? Can you speak? He asked, and when he asked this question, even he himself felt it was a strange question to ask. Can you speak? Unexpectedly, this bone really replied. However, it was not speaking verbally, but rather communicating through divine sense. It seemed like an infant that was just learning to speak, its voice incredibly soft and childish. My name is Ling Han, do you have a name? Ling Han asked. My name is Ling Han, the bone repeated Ling Han's words again, but its speed was considerably slower. Ling Han could feel a headache coming on. This bone seemed to have somehow gained consciousness and become intelligent, yet it was in the beginning stage of just starting to understand. Thus, it didn't even know how to speak, and knew only to repeat his words. He sighed, and sat cross-legged on the ground. The bone did not move, but it was visible that its upper half slightly bent, as if it was slanting its head to one side. Then, it too, wanted to sit down, but it did not have legs to cross, so it could only bury half the bone into the ground so that it, too, looked like it was sitting down. This was like a puppy that was imitating those around it. Ling Han talked with it, and did not touch on any important topics. He only wanted it to have more contact with words, hoping that it could truly have its own voice. Yaya, yaya. Half a day later, the bone finally was no longer continuing to copy his words, and said a phrase that belonged to it alone, yet it was completely meaningless. But it seemed very happy. Yaya, yaya, it repeated endlessly. Can you speak now? Ling Han asked. Can you speak now? Yaya, the bone replied happily. Fine, it was a waste of his breath to even ask. However, this bone was not so afraid of him now, so Ling Han could approach closer and examine it more clearly. This bone was considerably extraordinary. It was nothing so simple as having gained intelligence. The bone was not only snow white, it was also jade-like, not having the slightest feeling of malice, as if it was a delicate piece of art, yet the tastes of that grandmaster that had made it were too weird, and that was why he had made it into the shape of a bone. On the surface of the bone, there were multiple patterns that were extremely complicated. Ling Han only looked at them for a while, and he was already dizzy. They were even harder to comprehend than the celestial formation he had obtained. What relation did this bone have with that celestial corpse on the summit? It was only when Ling Han was descending the mountain that he gained that strange feeling. This bone should have appeared when he had been spying on that celestial corpse. It probably sensed Ling Han's gaze, and had thus followed him all the way here. Others could not have reached that kind of height, so they naturally could not have possibly alerted this bone. The bone was a part of that celestial corpse. And had somehow gained consciousness? Was he a magnet for trouble? Ling Han reflected on himself. The ancient sites that others went to were all normal, but when it was him, there was practically none that was actually normal. Do you eat anything? Ling Han drew out some food to eat and took out a portion, which he placed in front of the bone. The bone looked at it with a cocked head, and very much wanted to eat like how Ling Han was eating, but it did not have any mouth, and so could not eat in the same way at all. It was so anxious that it began to call out, Yaya, again, yet was completely helpless. It seemed to have been angered, and suddenly shot out a green-colored light which landed on the food. Pa, this portion of food immediately turned into nothing. Yaya. The bone once again called out in happiness. Its mood improved all of a sudden. It really had quite a temper. Ling Han was surprised. The power of this green light was very strong. No, it should not be normally strong, but rather extremely strong. At least, he estimated that he would need to exert his full effort to be a match for it. This bone was like a child emperor that had supreme authority in his grasp. With a slight move, it could turn the whole world over, and there was practically no one that could restrict it. It was only a bone, but how did it possess such power? And how had it gained consciousness? Ling Han stood up, and began walking down the mountain. The bone copied his movements. Its intelligence was becoming higher and higher, and it actually absorbed the spiritual qi in the heaven and earth, and grew its own physical body. Torso, limbs, and head quickly grew out. This was a real body of blood and flesh, though there was no soul. However, its body was enshrouded by an air of primal chaos, so how could any normal person be able to distinguish it clearly? What struck Ling Han speechless was that this guy was actually using him as a blueprint, and the body that it formed was a remarkably similar copy of him. As long as it was mere appearance, it would be too easy, but his aura could not be imitated. Yet the bone did not mind at all. It did not want to pass itself off as Ling Han. It was only the mentality of a child, wanting to be like you. What shocked Ling Han was that he did not discover any problem with the bone's body upon first look, and had to stare at it and examine closely to finally discover that there was an additional bone in this body, which was also its true form. It could be claimed that this guy's disguise could be considered perfect. Under such a disguise, the aura that it released was considerably weaker, seeming to be the early stage of Saint King. This was because it had an additional layer of blood and flesh wrapped around it, which naturally weakened some of its aura. After all, this was blood and flesh that it had grown on its own. This was good, it would avoid shocking others. Yaya, the bone spoke up. It now had its own body of flesh and blood, and could finally speak in the true meaning of the word, which made it very overjoyed. Yet the only phrase it could use to express its own will was still Yaya, and aside from that, it only knew how to imitate words. Ling Han smiled, and took out some clothes from the black tower which he tossed over to it. The two people descended the mountain, and they saw the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others not too long after. Upon seeing another that looked completely identical next to Ling Han, they were all shocked. Hadn't you just gone up to explore the mountain? Why had you brought someone back with you, and one that looked completely like you at that? This is Xiao Gu. Ling Han gave the bone a name. This is Xiao Gu. The bone repeated his words. Looking dim-witted, Long Xiangyue suddenly spluttered in laughter, and asked, Senior Brother Ling, why does he copy what you say? Senior Brother Ling, why does, the bone exuberantly repeated her words. Was this guy here to be funny? The heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others all had strange expressions. Who exactly was this person? Chapter 1648, Death Mushroom. Though the aura exuded from Xiao Gu was very obscure, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the other saints naturally could sense it, and knew that this was a saint. But a noble saint would actually be repeating words after someone, and had an expression of naivety and playing cute. Was that really appropriate? Ling Han chuckled, and replied, his personality is a little weird. It was indeed quite weird, they had never seen a saint like this. His personality is, Xiao Gu began to repeat words again, looking very dim-witted. Long Xiangyue couldn't help but laugh. This saint was really unusual. What other saint would not be putting on airs, and showing their great might? It was only Ling Han, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and other such newly established and young saints that were more amicable. But no matter how good-tempered they were not like Xiao Gu. Did he even treat himself like a saint? Ho ho ho. Xiao Gu also laughed. It was like a sponge now, absorbing everything around it, and learning whatever it could. Come on, let's go to the next mountain. They circled around the mountain, while Ling Han related the scene he had witnessed at the summit, which stunned the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others. Xiao Gu was expressionless, though. Every word that Ling Han spoke, it would repeat very patiently. It was not bothered, but Ling Han and the others were annoyed. Having someone repeat all the words that you had already heard by your ear, how could that not be annoying? But by the fourth day, Xiao Gu was finally no longer repeating words, and had instead become selective. It would not repeat words if it had heard something similar before, but for words that it had never heard before, it would repeat them excitedly. Ling Han did not explain the origins of Xiao Gu. He thought that there was no need for it. Though Xiao Gu possessed the strength of a saint, it was as innocent as a child in his eyes. He did not want others to show an unusual reaction towards Xiao Gu upon finding out about its origins. This was very good. The area that Ling Han and his group were presently traveling naturally had been traversed by a great many people before, so they did not find any saintly medicine. Instead, they found a few torn pieces of clothing, which should have been left behind when the cultivators that entered encountered demonic beasts, and were unfortunately eaten. There were not many demonic beasts like the Black Panther, but there was more or less a pattern to it, and that was that there would be one per mountain. Over a month later, the mountains no longer appeared in front of their eyes. Instead, there was a boundless plain, where a large river was flowing. The sound of the water was thunderous, as loud as floodwaters. This really was a massive river, as wide as 1,000 miles, and boasting an unknown length. It flowed here from a very far location, and large mile-high waves would occasionally rise. That scene was really quite astonishing. There were also living creatures in the river. There were large fishes that had sharp horns, large crocodiles with 6 legs and the tail of a bird, and also turtles that floated out of the surface of the water, their size eclipsing the skies, as if they bore a massive mountain on them. These living creatures were all incredibly powerful, but none of them left the water and attacked them. All of them stayed leisurely and carefree in the river. Ling Han and the others also had no intention of going into the water to provoke these powerful demonic beasts. This river was very strange, with patterns of great Tao surging in the waters. If they barged in rashly, it was possible that it would cause extremely serious damage to them. They walked along the course of this river. Going by the usual line of thought, anyone would want to know what was there at the end of this great river. Thus, the Empress and the others were possibly at its source. On this journey, 10 days very quickly passed. There were also slight changes to the plain. The variety of vegetation increased, and there were also animals now, both strong and weak. But no matter their strength, none of them had gained intelligence, and they were incredibly vicious. Gradually, they also found herbs here, but their grade wasn't very high, ranging from the spiritual ocean tier and shattering void tier to mountain river tier and heavenly body tier. But from eternal river tier onwards, there were very few, and not a single one in the saint tier at all. Xiao Gu had never seen these animals before, and when he saw one, he would run over and hug it. When he got bored, then he would release it. Sometimes, he would even be hugging a wild bull, or a giant elephant that was more than 10 times his size. The sight was very amusing. After another 3 days, an empty black land suddenly appeared before them. It was about a mile in diameter, and it was exuding a rotten stink from afar, causing one to feel dizzy upon a single sniff. In the very center of this open area, there was a piece of rotten meat. It was completely black, and if one did not look clearly, they could not possibly notice it. And it was precisely this that was the source of the stink. That is death mushroom. Ling Han exclaimed in shock after a moment. That piece of rotten meat was actually not genuine rotten meat, but rather a saintly medicine named death mushroom. It was said that only a single saintly medicine like this could be nurtured from within the body of a saint king after his death. However, saints represented the will of the heaven and earth. After their death, their spirits should also return to the heaven and earth, yet if they nurtured such a saintly medicine from their corpses, it would be spurned by the heaven and earth. Thus, death mushroom was incredibly poisonous, and even saint kings had a very high chance of dying if they consumed it directly. That would be equivalent to taking a saint king into one's body. How were they supposed to block it if their bodies exploded from within? However, one only had to refine the poison in the death mushroom, and this would be an incomparable great herb. Even among saintly medicine, it was one of the very best. Godly medicine from level 17 to level 20 could be called saintly medicine, and what Ling Han had previously obtained were basically all level 17 small saintly medicines, and the death mushroom was a saint king great herb. The martial intent of this saint king from when he had been alive was contained in it, and there was great value in studying it even to saint kings. However, this kind of great herb was not easily plucked. It was too poisonous. In the diameter of a mile, not a single blade of grass was growing. Nothing could grow, and even if a Saint King approached, it was possible that the poison would invade his body, and he would then be in great trouble. That was because the death mushroom was hated by the heaven and earth, and had a curse on it. This was something that even Saint Kings had to be wary of. You wouldn't be able to overcome everything else just because you were a peak stage Saint King. But where had the dead Saint King gone? The death mushroom was directly nurtured from the corpse of a Saint King, and grew from absorbing all the essence of a Saint King. Then, the skeleton that the Saint King had left behind should have been visible here. Ling Han and the others exchanged looks, all of them confused. Xiao Gu, meanwhile, did not take it to heart at all. He was only interested in novel things. As for corpses, he obviously had seen one for innumerable years. How can I collect this Saint King medicine? None of them went to ponder further about how this death mushroom had been nurtured. They didn't care even if it had fallen from the sky itself. What was important was how they were supposed to harvest it. The notionless saint shot out a palm strike, his origin power condensing into a large hand that grabbed out at that death mushroom. But in the process of the large hand stretching out, it was continuously corroded by the black chi that rose up in this place. It was already completely corroded before it had managed to grab the death mushroom. And this led to a lashback too. The notionless saint grunted, and raised his right hand. He could see that there was actually a dark area on his palm. There were strange patterns flickering on it, and this black chi was presently spreading upwards from his palm. The notionless saint hurriedly tried to stop it, but it was a feat that was impossible to accomplish. He decisively slashed out at his own right arm by using his other hand as a blade. Pooh, blood sprayed out, and his right hand was severed at the elbow. This arm fell, but it had already turned into ash before it had even reached the ground. The intensity of the poison was clearly incredible. Chapter 1649, Harvesting Saint King Medicine. Death mushroom, an extraordinary poison. The notionless saint was a small saint in any case, yet he had just stretched out his origin power into the area where the death mushroom was growing, and had not even touched that saintly medicine, and he had already sustained such a terrifying backlash. If he had really used his hand to make direct contact, what would have happened? His body would have probably directly rotted into a pool of mush. This death mushroom was comparable to a Saint King in itself, the only difference being that it would not make any active movements. A small saint was naturally delusional if he wanted to harvest it. The notionless saint quickly drew out some alchemical pills, ingesting them. The damage that came from severing his own arm was still quite large, though a new arm immediately reformed and regrew, it had still used some of his life force. This would naturally have damaged his foundations. This is impossible. He shook his head. Merely a slight touch of the aura of the death mushroom, and a small saint could only sever his arm to save himself. If it was direct contact, it would definitely mean absolute death. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden and Long Yushan also shook their heads. This was really a hopeless situation. True, the place where the death mushroom grew was so obvious, so if it could be easily done, would it still be left for them? Before this, there had been many saints who had entered, and there might even have been Saint Kings from the Forbidden Lands among them too. Even Saint Kings could not harvest it, what more they? However, Ling Han brainstormed. If he used lightning flash to harvest the death mushroom, his speed would be indescribably fast, so his period of contact with the poison of the death mushroom would be incredibly short. Then, he could still actively channel the indestructible heaven scroll, endlessly increasing his defense. The problem was that defense and immunity to poison were two different things. Small Tower, can I resist such a powerful poison? He asked Small Tower. Though Saint King medicine was incredibly valuable, how could it compare to his own life? Small Tower tsked. Ignorant child, poison is also a part of the regulations of the heaven and earth. The indestructible heaven scroll can resist all the techniques in the world, so what is mere strong poison worth fuck? It had not finished its words when Ling Han had already charged out. Xiao, Ling Han had turned into a streak of light, and before the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others could react in any way, he had already shot to the central part of the poisonous area. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the death mushroom in one go, directly throwing it into the black tower. Then, his figure continued to streak past, and appeared on the other side of the poisonous area. Under the channeling of the indestructible heaven scroll, his whole body was releasing a golden light, and multiple patterns of great Tao appeared, dazzling the heaven and earth. He slowly circled around the poisonous area and returned, completely unharmed. Why you? Long Yushan pointed at Ling Han, and even her voice was trembling. She really could not have imagined that Ling Han would have plucked the death mushroom so easily. Ling Han broke into a grin. Come on, let's see if there are other such saintly medicines elsewhere. There was something that he did not say. Underneath the death mushroom, he discovered a small piece of flesh, and that was real flesh that belonged to some living being. But it was really very small, smaller than even a fingernail. And it was precisely this piece of flesh that had nurtured the death mushroom. It should be known that even a saint king might not be able to nurture death mushroom. Not only did this saint king have to be incredibly powerful when he was alive, he also had to be killed by the hand of another, and still have his vitality. Otherwise, an aged saint king would not have enough blood essence to nurture the death mushroom. Furthermore, a saint king corpse would only be able to nurture a single death mushroom, and when the death mushroom matured, there would only be a pile of bones left of the saint king corpse. It could no longer nurture a second death mushroom. From this, it could be seen how difficult it was to nurture the death mushroom. Yet now, a piece of flesh the size of a fingernail actually nurtured a death mushroom, and Ling Han had also sensed that there was still astonishing power contained in that piece of flesh. It was definitely capable of nurturing a few more death mushrooms. It was definitely impossible that this was flesh left behind by a saint king's corpse. The blood and flesh of a celestial. Ling Han thought. Perhaps a celestial had been wounded when the Great War had happened all those years ago, and his blood and flesh had spilled. One of the pieces of his flesh had fallen here, and then nurtured the death mushroom. Only the flesh and blood of a celestial could be so powerful. A little bit was enough to nurture a death mushroom, and could even nurture a second and third in future as well. However, the period of growth for a saintly medicine was counted in hundreds of millions of years. Clearly, Ling Han could not possibly stay here and wait for the second death mushroom to sprout. Are you all right? The heavenly phoenix divine maiden asked quickly in worry. I'm fine. Ling Han shook his head with a smile. Xiao Gu watched from the sidelines, his head slanted to one side. Was this very fun? He ignored the others, and directly strode into the poisonous area. Though the death mushroom had already been removed, the poisonous nature of this place did not disappear so quickly. Suddenly, a black aura wound around him, and it was as if they had become multiple chains that continuously entwined around him. Xiao Gu. Long Xianyue and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden exclaimed. Because he looked completely identical to Ling Han, both women naturally felt affection for him. As Xiao Gu walked, he was completely indifferent, as if this was not a poisonous zone, but rather his own backyard. No matter how much the poison surged, he did not mind at all. Even Ling Han was extremely stunned, what more the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others. He was more knowledgeable about the amazing nature of Xiao Gu than the others, but he had never thought that this guy was actually awesome to this extent. Ling Han suddenly paused, and looked towards the left sideways from them. Xiao, 3 figures shot out. Those were 3 young men, and they were all tall and broad. Their clothes were very strange. Rather than calling them clothes, they should rather be called accessories. They also wore headdresses woven from bird feathers on their heads. The feathers stood 3 feet tall on them. Ling Han looked at these 3 people, his face wearing an expression of surprise. That was because while these people's auras were very strong, they were clearly much weaker than him, yet he was still unable to distinguish their cultivation levels. Because the clothes that the 3 of them were wearing were too revealing, multiple black-veined patterns that looked a little like the demonic patterns of the netherworld were clearly visible on their skin, but upon closer examination, they were completely different. Previously, Ling Han had felt that the cultivators of the netherworld had an evil aura because they were being repelled by the regulations of the heaven and earth. In fact, after he had cultivated the regulations of the netherworld, he realized that there was basically no difference between the two. Extreme Yin gave birth to Yang, and extreme Yang gave birth to Yin. This was an unending cycle. But the black patterns on these three gave him a completely different feeling. Hand over the precious medicine, a young man spoke up, yet he was saying this to Xiao Gu, who was presently strolling slowly back. Clearly, they had long since known that there was a death mushroom here, and now they did not see the saintly medicine, but there was a person walking there, so who else could have harvested it except for Xiao Gu? His words were incredibly strange. At first, they should not have been able to understand him, but he also communicated the same message through his divine sense, and this managed to breach the language barrier. Hand over the precious medicine. Xiao Gu imitated his words. He was very interested in new phrases, and also very interested in people he had never seen before. When the three young men heard this, they were all furious. You actually dare to parrot my words? You outsiders, do you all not know what suffering is without being taught a lesson? The young man who had spoken earlier moved, and grabbed out at Xiao Gu. Wang, the black patterns on his body flowed, and a black-colored thread actually shot out of his hand, seemingly turning into a web. Immediately, an expression of shock appeared on Ling Han's face. Chapter 1650, Yuan Tribe. Ling Han could not distinguish the exact cultivation levels of these three young men, but when the other party moved, he could determine his battle prowess. Not cultivation level, but battle prowess. That was because the cultivation technique this person cultivated was incredibly strange. It was not like the traditional type, and one could not use Heavenly Body Tier or Genesis Tier to call their cultivation levels. It could only be said that his battle prowess was comparable to Eternal River Tier. It was just like, this young man had created a completely different system of cultivation. This was quite amazing. Though creating a cultivation technique was very difficult, a top-grade prodigy would be able to accomplish this feat, but establishing a completely new system of cultivation would mean starting from zero, and making something out of nothing. This was a completely new innovation. Of course, Ling Han definitely did not think that this young man had such a nature-defying ability, but rather it was his ancestors that had created a completely new system of cultivation, and he was only cultivating according to it. In this ancient land that had been closed off from the outside world for who knew how many years, there had actually appeared a group of cultivators that cultivated a different system of cultivation. From the word outsiders, he knew that these three were the natives at this time. Furthermore, their battle prowess was comparable to the high extreme or the consummate level of the Eternal River Tier, which meant that this cultivation system was already very mature, and there were definitely saint-level seniors present. However, though creating a new system of cultivation was very impressive, in the end, everything still revolved around power. How was Eternal River Tier level battle prowess supposed to match a saint? What more when even Ling Han could not clearly feel Xiao Gu's strength? He only knew that the latter was very, very strong, and even he felt a wariness and reluctance to become enemies with Xiao Gu. Pung! The young man's attack landed on Xiao Gu. Being able to hit his target was not because that young man was strong, but rather because Xiao Gu had not dodged or parried at all. The thought processes of Xiao Gu were completely different from normal human beings. His expression was filled with curiosity, and he asked, Yaya? What he meant was, why did you hit me? And using such a completely useless attack at that. Yet the young man was startled. He had not expected that Xiao Gu would be so strong that his attack was rendered completely ineffective. But he did not panic, and still proudly proclaimed, Don't make me bring our tribe elders, or your only path would be death. Hand over the precious medicine. The two young men beside him elbowed him, signaling him to look towards the three extraordinary beauties, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, Long Yushan, and Long Xianyue. That young man seemed to be their leader. As his eyes swept over them, his heart involuntarily throbbed wildly. These 3 women were all exquisitely beautiful, indescribably beautiful. Though he was cultivating a different system, his aesthetic tastes were no different from normal. And these 3 women, too, have to follow us back to the tribe, he added. Ling Han couldn't help but sneer. Had these 3 people's heads been kicked by a donkey? 3 minor characters with merely eternal river tier battle prowess dared to have designs on a saint? A thought flashed in his mind, and he said, then, we'll all go and take a look at your tribe. What gives you the right? The young man in the lead slanted a look at Ling Han, a completely condescending expression on his face. Ling Han stretched out his hand, and as his aura surged, pa, those 3 young men immediately knelt, their bodies sweating madly. They felt as if their hearts were about to burst. Lead the way, Ling Han stated calmly. If you blabber any more nonsense, I will begin to commit murder. In any case, I only need one of you to be alive to lead the way. All 3 of them trembled. They could clearly sense a frightening killing intent from Ling Han's tone, and hurriedly nodded, beginning to lead the way ahead. However, they were sneering internally. You all can be as arrogant as you like now, but when we enter the tribe, all the elites will mobilize, and that will be the time of your deaths. Ling Han saw their expressions clearly, and was completely indifferent. With his present strength, he would be unafraid even if he was faced with a peak stage Saint King. In the entire ancient realm, there was no longer any elite that could suppress him. As they traveled, Ling Han asked the 3 of them about the situation here, and under his intimidating pressure, the 3 young men did not dare to lie. They called themselves the Yuan tribe, and resided in this area. It had been that way for generations, and they had already passed hundreds of billions of years, at least. It had been such a long time that even the godly metal that recorded their history had already worn away, and their history could no longer be traced. There were a considerable number of other tribes like them, and they were all distributed in the proximity of the Great River. The nearer they were to the upper course, the stronger the tribe would be, and the Yuan tribe was the weakest. Of course, though they were the weakest, they were not all that weak either. The tribal chief's strength was at the level of peak stage Saint King, and the tribal elders were at the level of ordinary Saint Kings. Every tribe would have at least 5 such elites. It was not clear how many Saint Kings there were in the tribe in the uppermost course of the river, but the Yuan tribe had 5, and their close neighbor, the Qing tribe, similarly had 5 Saint Kings as well. Why did they live along the river? It was not for the sake of survival, but rather for the purpose of cultivation. They had drunk water from that great river since their childhood. That would allow their rate of cultivation to soar, and they had already advanced into the Saint tier in a short 100,000 years. If anyone heard that, they would be terrified to death. You can work hard on cultivation in the outside world, and after a few 100 million years, it was still possible that it was all wasted effort, and you would stay at the consummate level of the eternal river tier, unable to progress further. However, here you merely had to drink some water and cultivate for a while, and becoming a Saint tier would be an easy feat. However, this was only suited to them. There had been outsiders before that had also taken water to drink, and the result was their bodies had directly exploded, which led to their deaths. This was of no relation to cultivation level. That was because the babies born here were only in the heaven tier and shattering void tier, yet they could still easily drink the river water. Apparently, this still had to fit their unique system of cultivation. The further up the river's course, the more essence of great Tao there was in the river water. Thus, there were frequent wars among the tribes. They all hoped to move to a location that was further up the river's course so that their tribe could become stronger and stronger. As they spoke, they had already arrived at the Yuan tribe. This was a massive primitive tribe. It was clearly incredibly huge, but there were no cities built. Instead, there were multiple tents that extended into the distance. Some were houses that had been built with wood. In any case, they were all very simple. There really were a lot of people here, numbering in the millions, and they were all like these 3 young men, dressed in a strange attire and covered in black patterns all over their bodies. Aside from them, they could also see obvious outsiders there. When they walked among them, it was like there was a flag on each of them. They were all too obvious. Apparently, this was the first station for outsiders. And it was at this moment that the three young men suddenly called out in gibberish. Suddenly, the surrounding natives all surrounded them, all of them showing a powerful animosity. A middle-aged man walked out of the crowd. His aura was very strong, and judging based on Ling Han's experience, this person should have reached the saint tier, but he was only comparable to a small saint. In this place, saints were completely common. Simply walk around, and you would meet with saints here and there. This could be treated like a miniature version of the celestial realm. Furthermore, it had long since been severed from the celestial realm, and pushed into the cracks of the ancient realm. Even here, there were saints everywhere. Then, when they went to the celestial realm, there really would be as many saints as there were dogs. The notionless saints and Long Yushan's feeling of superiority as saints was immediately battered to nothing. Let them go, the middle-aged man declared coldly. Let them go. Seeing so many new people, Xiao Gu was excited, and naturally began to imitate words again. The middle-aged man cast a look on Xiao Gu, and showed a sliver of anger, but he did not take it to heart, and continued, now that you have entered our Yuan tribe, you still dare to be arrogant? Xiao Gu repeated, now that you have entered our Yuan. Holy fuck. You're looking for death. The middle-aged man was furious, and shot out a palm strike at Xiao Gu. Chapter 1651, Another Cultivation System. Xiao Gu did not dodge or hide, and allowed this strike to land, causing a muffled sound on his body. His expression was completely curious as he asked, Yaya? Why are you people all so weird, to offer greetings in this manner? Only now was the middle-aged man shocked. Though he had not used his full power in that strike, he was still unable to accept that it was so easily resolved just like that. Even his face was about to turn green. He took a few steps backwards, drawing out the distance between himself and Xiao Gu. Then, he began to channel his cultivation technique. Wang, wang, wang. Multiple black halos actually appeared on him. There were a total of 9, but the first 8 halos were as black as ink, while the 9th was lighter in color. This was the display of a cultivation level of their system of cultivation. 1 black ring represented a single cultivation level, and 9 rings was the strongest level here, which was comparable to the Genesis tier. The darkness of the black ring represented low extreme, medium extreme, early stage, late stage, peak stage, and so on. In any case, it was a complete process of change. Previously, Ling Han had already learned about this from the 3 young men's mouths. This was not any big secret. If they were interrogated about their cultivation technique, they might resist violently, and would rather die than submit. Xiao Gu was indifferent, and even slanted its head to one side. It looked left and looked right. But it was only a while before it then focused in on that middle-aged man, leaking out an obvious expression of loathing. Yaya. It showed killing intent. Ling Han was surprised. Though Xiao Gu was baffling, and loved to repeat words, this was only an innocent child in his eyes, yet now it actually showed killing intent. This was stunning to him. Xiao Gu had also once been a man of this world fine, at least it was a part of this world. Why would it show such strong animosity towards this middle-aged man like it was facing a strong enemy? Yaya. Xiao Gu released a shout of fury, its eyes suddenly shooting out a green-colored light. Pa, the streak of light landed on the middle-aged man, and suddenly blasted him to pieces. So what if he was a small saint? In front of Xiao Gu, he couldn't even survive a single blow. The people around were all stunned before releasing sharp screams as they all turned and fled. Yaya? Xiao Gu scratched its head, its expression completely vacant. Why had it been angry just now? You've gotten into trouble. There were still some outsiders there, and all of them showed dissatisfaction towards Ling Han and his group. The spiritual qi and natural resources here are abundant. We have only come to an agreement with them after much difficulty, allowing us to cultivate here and trade resources, yet you guys actually killed someone here. Isn't this causing trouble to us? They all pointed fingers. Perhaps they actually were no longer afraid of them, because they knew that the Yuan tribe would definitely move to punish Ling Han and his group angrily. Otherwise, who would dare be so insolent in front of saints? Ling Han frowned, and said, "You all have your way of handling things, and we have ours. What right do you have to reproach us? On the basis that we are all cultivators of the immortal realm, I will not call you to account. If you blurt any more nonsense, I will let you suffer the consequences of your own actions." These people dared not speak further. No matter what, there were saints among these people. How could they possibly trifle with saints? But there were still a few people grumbling internally. What were they so puffed up about? They would become corpses in a short while. It was too unfortunate for those 3 women. All of them were astonishingly beautiful, but what a pity, they would be either killed or defiled by barbarians. Ling Han saw this, and couldn't help but feel his killing intent burn. He flicked out a finger, and pa, a few people who had unbearable expressions on their faces immediately died from having their heads pierced through. Fuck, did they really think that he was a benevolent person, and would not commit a massacre? Now, everyone was shivering from fear. Only now did they recall the authority of saints. They were the strongest existence of the immortal realm, and represented the will of heaven and earth. How could they allow insults? Shio. And it was at this moment that a few figures shot from the depths of the tribe. All of their auras were incredibly strong, as if they were capable of even shattering the heavens. They definitely were Saint King level, but because their system of cultivation was different, Ling Han was unable to accurately determine just what level these people had actually reached. "Kill all of them," an old man with a crown of feathers on his head commanded. The feathers were as tall as 9 meters and incredibly dazzling in color. Clearly, one only had to look at their headdresses to estimate every person's status here. The longer the feathers one was adorned with, the higher his status. "Yes, 4th elder," the 4 people by the old man's side all answered respectfully. They all leaped out, and surrounded Ling Han and his group. Long Yushan hurriedly drew Long Xiangyue into her spatial god tool. Once the battle broke out, that would be a battle of saints. Merely the slightest scrape, and Long Xiangyue would easily lose her life. Wang. Those 4 people all activated their cultivation techniques to the fullest. Black rings abruptly appeared on their bodies. They all had 9 rings each, and the darkness of the 9th ring was higher than that of the middle-aged man from before. Through comparison, these 4 should be great saints. Xiao Gu again became filled with killing intent, his face showing an expression of fury. He loudly roared, "Yaya!" His eyes glowed. Pa. A green ray of light streaked past. He only turned his head, and the green light swept over those 4 great saint-level elites. However, this time, the 4 great elites did not die. They were only split in 2 by that green light, and could still rejoin their bodies with much difficulty. The 4th elder showed an expression of shock. Even he was terrified at the sight of this kind of strength, but only after a moment of being startled, he suddenly exclaimed in shock, "Green light! Green light! You are the legendary destroyer." He pointed at Xiao Gu, his expression wild. Green light, you. Xiao Gu again began to imitate his words. Even if he was a native of this place, as long as he did not channel that kind of cultivation technique, and showed the black rings of light, it would be very normal. The 4th elder cried out repeatedly, and another 4 elites **** appeared after only a while. 3 of the elites had the same attire as he had, while the last one had a headdress whose feathers were actually 12 meters long. He was the tribal chief of the Yuan tribe. 4th, you actually did not manage to take care of these outsider mutts? The 3rd elder laughed loudly, his voice like a bell. He had always been at odds with the 4th elder, so now that he had the chance, he naturally had to mock him. Yet the fourth elder's expression was grim and serious. As he pointed at Xiao Gu, he exclaimed, "He can release green light, the legendary green light of destruction." What? The four great elites all paled. It has been passed on through the generations that there would be a day when a man that used green light would appear and destroy everything. Yet Xiao Gu was still earnestly imitating his words. "Fourth, you, actually," then he answered his own question. He can release, and it seemed he was more and more fluent with his words. In a few more days, he would not speak in clumps like this. Charge. The five of them had solemn expressions as they stretched their hands out towards the skies. Wang, wang, wang. The power of innumerable others of the tribe surged into their bodies in a very strange manner. That was the power of the nation, or at least something of the sort. 9 black rings also appeared on their bodies, and they were practically all as black as ink. Charge. Xiao Gu imitated, and it was very fitting for the situation. Seeing the black rings on these people, it also showed a boundless killing intent. Chapter 1652, Destroyer. Ling Han was not sure whether Xiao Gu would bring a calamity of destruction to this place, but he could confirm one fact, and that was that Xiao Gu was definitely as incompatible as fire and water with the people here. To be more exact, it should be filled with animosity towards this kind of cultivation system. Xiao Gu took the initiative to charge out, green light shooting from its eyes and wound around its hands. The light was filled with thriving vitality, yet its destructive power was boundless. Even a Saint King would be in big trouble if he was touched even a bit by that green light. However, the 5 elites all drew upon the power of the tribe. This could be considered as a different kind of power of the nation. With the help of such a power boost, the black rings on them had enlarged greatly. Charge. They rushed forwards, beginning a fierce battle with Xiao Gu. As for Ling Han and the others, they did not take them to heart at all. It was very obvious that all of them were very much weaker than them. Once they killed Xiao Gu, they could just calmly deal with the lot of them. Xiao Gu was really very strong. Its battle prowess was considerably stronger than even ordinary peak stage Saint Kings, and could be considered a big shot among Saint Kings, but it was facing 5 Saint Kings, and they were Saint Kings that had drawn on power of the nation. These 5 people were too powerful, especially the chief of the Yuan tribe. He initially was already a peak stage Saint King with frightening battle prowess, but added with the boost from power of the nation, it seemed like he had broken through the limits of Saint King tier and had become terrifyingly strong. Xiao Gu was unafraid, and battled fiercely with the 5 of them. Its disadvantage was that it was only a bone, even its body was formed from forcibly condensing the elite of heaven and earth into solid form, and not a real body. This naturally affected its battle prowess. However, it was indeed very strong. It fiercely blasted out green light with astonishing destructive power that even the 5 great elites were incredibly wary of. But under the siege formed by the combined forces of the 5 great elites, it was still at a disadvantage, and this was something that nothing could be done about. That was because its opponents were too strong. Any single one of them had the battle prowess of a peak stage Saint King, and the strongest among them had already exceeded this level. "Step back," Ling Han said to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others. Then, with a battle cry, he also charged into the battle. He was going to lend Xiao Gu a helping hand. "You are overestimating yourself," the 4th elder sneered, and pressed out a palm towards Ling Han. Lightning flash. Ling Han suddenly sped up. Xiao, at this moment, his speed had reached the limits of the ancient realm, and in a way that the 4th elder completely did not expect and was not alert for, he charged right in front of the former, and shot out a punch right at the other's head, the 9 heavens flame blazing on his fist. With this kind of extreme speed, anyone would be hit if he was not on the alert. But a Saint King was still a Saint King, after all, what more when he possessed peak battle prowess. The 4th elder suddenly spat out a mouthful of vitality in this kind of situation, and forced his body to swiftly lean backwards, trying to avoid this punch from Ling Han. At the same time, he shot out a flying kick aimed straight at Ling Han's chest to prevent the threat that came from Ling Han's continuous approach. It could be said that in his present condition, such a reaction was the most logical. Ling Han humphed, and his fist descended, landing on the fourth elder's kneecap. Pung! The punch landed, and a terrible scream was heard. The fourth elder had already been sent flying. One of his legs had been blown apart, and with how frightening the destructive power of the nine heavens flame was, the flames were still spreading upwards from his knee, intending to burn his whole person to nothing. The fourth elder was very decisive, and severed his body with a hand from the hip downwards, so he was sliced in half. In this way, though he had still sustained serious injury, he had removed a fatal threat to his life. Fourth, the other four elites all exclaimed in shock. "I'm fine," the fourth elder exclaimed, his face pale. In truth, the damage he had suffered was extremely serious. He had forcibly severed the lower half of his body, and lost a great amount of blood essence. Even if he was a saint king, he would need a great many years to fully recover. He burned his blood essence, forcibly growing out 2 new legs. Otherwise, in a battle of this level, he would be very much helpless. Be careful of his speed and those flames, he advised. The other 4 elites nodded. That extreme speed was indeed frightening, and even they could not trace it. They had to be absolutely vigilant and guard against it, while the destructive power of those flames was too terrifying, forcing the fourth elder to cut his losses. "Don't treat him like an ordinary 9 rings elite," the 5 great elites reminded one another. Meanwhile, Xiao Gu was incredibly cold and detached. At present, its killing intent had seeped out, and it was proficient in battle like an incredibly experienced assassin. It only had one aim, and that was to kill these 5 powerful enemies. The battle continued. Because they were already on guard, Ling Han's extreme speed could no longer let him succeed like how he had before due to their carelessness and lack of anticipation, but it still created a great problem for the 5 great elites. They had to stay alert at all times, or Ling Han would possibly charge over abruptly, and give them a fatal blow. Ling Han used his full battle prowess, the killing formations active. This was his capital that allowed him to face these 5 great elites head-on, but if one was talking about destructive power, the 9 heavens flame was more advantageous. He used the immovable deity metal body mystical power, and 6 arms formed, which allowed him to simultaneously use a variety of different celestial techniques. The divine demon sword and the broken wooden sword slashed out simultaneously, the sword light surging out like an incredibly frightening dragon. "So, he is actually so strong." In the distance, Long Yushan was already gaping in shock. She knew that Ling Han was very freakish, but she had never imagined that a young man that had previously been completely inferior to her in cultivation level would catch up and completely surpass her, becoming a medium saint, and his battle prowess was so strong that she could only look up at him. Her thoughts were in a mess, yet she suddenly recalled that ridiculous suggestion from Long Xianyue, and her pretty face involuntarily flushed with a rosy red. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden, meanwhile, had an expression filled with pride. This was her man. Seeing Long Yushan's face fill with embarrassment and shyness, she knew that the former already had Ling Han's figure in her heart, which put her on guard. For those who had already entered the rear court of the Ling clan, she would not be bothered, but she definitely would not allow anyone new to join. Ling Han and Xiao Gu joined forces, battling the 5 great elites fiercely. To Ling Han, this battle was a little baffling. In truth, it could have been completely avoided, but since they were already exchanging blows, he did not hesitate any longer. He used his full power, wanting to suppress these 5 great elites. They were definitely as incompatible with Xiao Gu as fire and water, and only one side would be able to survive at the end. Then, Ling Han's choice was very simple to make. Kill. Xiao Gu's battle experience was all instinctive, but as the battle progressed, it became more and more proficient. It was not simply using those techniques based on instinct, but was more actively channeling these techniques. At most, this could only increase its strength by another 10% to 20%, but in such a vigorous battle, could they afford the gap of 10 to 20% of battle prowess? Ling Han's side suddenly got the upper hand. Not good, the legends were true. The sun of green light would bring destruction. Let us quickly head to the Qing tribe, and ask them for help. The chief of the Yuan tribe communicated to the 4 elders through divine sense. But they are feuding with us, and we have fought for who knows how many years. Who knows how many people of both tribes have been killed in all these years, the second elder said doubtfully. On the question of the survival of the whole world, what is such a minor feud worth? The Yuan tribe chief declared resolutely. Not just the Qing tribe, but the Yun tribe, Jin tribe, and Lu tribe, all the tribes have to unite and destroy this disaster together. Chapter 1653, Deduction. The 5 elites had reached an agreement, and were about to retreat. If they continued fighting, it was possible that all of them would die. Can you escape? Ling Han had long since anticipated this. He spread out the 9 heavens flame, which formed a massive cage. Not good. When the 5 great elites saw this, they were both furious and shocked. After such a long battle, they naturally knew the frightening nature of the 9 heavens flame, so how could they dare to allow such flames to wind around them? That was a calamity that would lead to their deaths. However, throwing out this technique was also very dangerous for Ling Han because he had released the 9 heavens flame, which meant that he had temporarily lost a powerful weapon that could threaten the 5 great elites, causing him to become a target of their attacks. Kill this brat. True enough, the eyes of the 5 great elites became cold, focusing on Ling Han. At present, they were genuinely feeling that their lives were threatened. Naturally, they would spare no expense to kill Ling Han. Previously, though they had not been merciful, their main target was Xiao Gu, and they mostly guarded and defended against Ling Han. Ling Han suddenly felt tremendous pressure. That was the combined battle prowess of 5 peak stage Saint King tier level elites, with one of them even leaping out of this level. Every blow that blasted at him was like an earth-shattering tsunami that could destroy a great star. It couldn't be helped. He wanted to kill them all in one go, so they naturally would counterattack at all costs. Xiao Gu released a furious shout. Its mentality was very innocent. Ling Han was the first person it had met, and he treated it very kindly as well, so it had subconsciously become reliant on Ling Han. These 5 people were its fated enemies in the first place, and now they actually wanted to kill Ling Han, so its rage naturally soared sky high. In its violent rage, its whole body was glowing. Xiao, it, too, drew out a weapon. It was actually a bone. That was its true form, which it was holding in its hand and wielding like a staff. Though it was not very long, every wave would produce a rainbow of green light with incredibly frightening destructive power. This definitely could not be the bone of a Saint King, it had to belong to a severing mundane tier at least. In an ordinary situation, even a precious tool of severing mundane tier would be useless. If your cultivation level was inadequate, then even if you wielded a celestial king tool, you would not be able to release its might. However, Xiao Gu was different. This tool was its true form, and the wielder was the puppet instead. In this way, the celestial bone showed its might, and how many people in the immortal realm could resist it? What kept the 5 great elites hopeful was the fact that though the green light was indestructible, the wielder was not strong at all, so they could calmly dodge. However, Ling Han had already begun to close in. The cage formed by the 9 heavens flame was rapidly closing in, approaching those 5 great elites. Damn it! The 5 great elites all roared. If the web of fire tightened around them, they would be refined alive. Furthermore, as the space became smaller and smaller, it would become increasingly difficult for them to dodge Xiao Gu's attacks. Blood Ocean Great Technique, the Yuan tribe chief shouted loudly, his body shattering with a bang, and actually forming a shower of blood. However, he had obviously not died. Every drop of blood passed out through the slits left in the web of fire, and then recondensed outside, forming his true form. The 4 elders did the same, their bodies turning into a shower of blood, and managing to escape. However, though they had escaped, all of their faces were pale, and the black rings they had also dimmed considerably. They seemed to have paid a great price for managing this feat. How's it possible? The elders were actually forced to use the Blood Ocean Great technique. This is an absolute life-saving technique, and definitely would not be used unless there was no other option. How could these outsiders be so strong, forcing the elders into such desperate straits? Beneath them, all the members of the Yuan tribe were gasping in shock. They had seen too many outsiders throughout these years. Which of them had not behaved humbly and obediently? Yet now, they were actually reduced to such a sorry state by two outsiders. "Let's go," the Yuan tribe chief shouted loudly. They were no match for Ling Han and Xiao Gu, they had to find others to help them. Ling Han used lightning flash, whoever was fleeing, he would stop their progress. He discovered that the speed cultivated by these natives was indeed very fast, and their battle prowess was also truly strong, but in terms of technique, they were too lacking. It was just like they had only learned a single cultivation technique, and increased their cultivation level, but their use of techniques was incredibly pitiful. Ling Han was a good example. Just how many celestial techniques did he know? Darkness of the Paramount Night, Flying Dragon's Shadow Hands, Tide of the Ages. Every one of them had powerful might, but the elites of the Yuan tribe did not even have one. The only Blood Ocean Great technique was used to save their lives. If they had managed to learn celestial techniques, their battle prowess would improve further. However, they were cultivating a completely different system of cultivation, so it was a mystery whether they would even be able to use celestial techniques because the use of celestial techniques was based on one's cultivation technique. Similarly, if one clearly practiced spear techniques since childhood, yet was given a saber, then how would he be able to release the might of his spear techniques? Thankfully, they did not know how to. Otherwise, the result could have possibly been completely opposite, and it would have been Ling Han and the others thinking of ways to escape. Ling Han's heart suddenly jolted. Where there was only power, with no technique, the battle prowess of these 5 people was already so strong. What did that mean? The frightening nature of this different system of cultivation. One did not need any specific techniques, and only had to master the basics, and he would be able to possess frightening battle prowess. Was this a branch from some force of the celestial realm? That was not right. He had never heard that there was another system of cultivation in the celestial realm. This was definitely a large matter, or could even be considered a matter that could overturn everyone's perceptions. One of the 2 kinds of cultivation systems was definitely stronger than the other. The inferior one would be eliminated, to be replaced by the superior one. If this cultivation system was really so awesome, shouldn't the whole celestial realm have switched to it? Then those above Saint Tier definitely would not be called Severing Mundane. They would possibly be called 10-ring elites or something of the sort. Furthermore, though he was still not clear about the time of the great turmoil of the celestial realm, it was definitely not as long as 100 billion years ago. This also meant that one corner of the celestial realm had been struck down a very, very long time ago, and buried in the cracks of space of the ancient realm. This had not happened because of that great turmoil. Hold on, was it because they wanted to eliminate this cultivation system that this piece of heaven and earth was buried in the ancient realm? But being able to create such a system, its inventor definitely had to be an incredibly powerful existence. Could he have been trapped so easily? Ling Han could not understand. Perhaps there was an answer that lay in the depths of this mystery realm, or perhaps it would have to wait until he entered the celestial realm, and search ancient tomes to find some clues, and piece together the truth. As he thought this, he did not hesitate in his movements either. After standing in the path of the 5 great elites, he again used the 9 heavens flame, which trapped the 5 elites once more. Even if they used the Blood Ocean Great technique to escape, it would be useless. It would only delay their deaths for a while longer. The 5 great elites roared, but did not beg for mercy. Just like Xiao Gu despised them naturally, they also saw Xiao Gu as an old enemy that was absolutely irreconcilable with them. Then, there was only one word to sum everything up: fight. However, with the combined efforts of Ling Han and Xiao Gu, the 5 great elites could not evade the fate of death. There was no grief from the heaven and earth, nor was there a rain of blood streaming down. It was as if just a few nobodies had died. Was this because they were in the mystery realm? Or was it that this cultivation system had not gotten the approval of the heaven and earth, so the heaven and earth would not be moved by the deaths of a few saint-tier level elites like them? Ling Han's heart was filled with curiosity. Chapter 1654, Peak Stage Medium Saint. Ling Han was a man with a great curiosity. Besides, the more he thought closely about this matter, the more frightening it became. Perhaps there was an earth-shattering secret concealed behind it. After Xiao Gu showed its might, it returned to being silly. Its completely confused expression was absolutely incapable of convincing others that it was one of the strongest existences in the world today. Ling Han did not start a massacre. He could not simply issue a death penalty to those who had merely cultivated a different cultivation technique, but he ransacked the whole wealth of the Yuan tribe without hesitation. Those people from before had not lied, this tribe was indeed abundant with resources. Though there weren't any saintly medicines, there was really a large amount of eternal river tier level godly medicines, and there was also a great volume of godly metal. Ling Han even found 3 pieces that were saint tier level. The whole tribe was anxious, fearing that Ling Han and his group would eliminate their entire tribe. After Ling Han had spoken repeatedly, the members of the Yuan tribe finally felt relieved. He obtained the cultivation technique that this tribe was cultivating, and upon closer look, as expected, it was a completely different cultivation system. Though the spiritual qi here was incredibly abundant, to the natives, this actually was completely useless because the source of their power did not come from converting spiritual qi into their own origin power, but rather was that great river. There was a kind of amazing substance in the river water that could provide them with power, and in terms of regulations, it was also the same. It belonged solely to the great river, and was completely different from this heaven and earth. From a certain perspective, these people could be considered to belong to another world. Apparently, he really had to make his way to the source of the river for a look. There was also alchemy here. After some examination, Ling Han found out that if these alchemical pills were concocted, they were not the slightest bit beneficial for the residents of the ancient realm, and would even cause them serious injury because they were completely unable to strengthen their origin power, but rather would be converted into another kind of energy, which was called spiritual power. Ling Han wanted to ask Xiao Gu about this, but it would either imitate his words, or keep exclaiming, "Yaya." It was completely impossible to get any form of clue from it. He refined the death mushroom inside the black tower, removing the corrosive power contained within, and leaving behind only substances that were beneficial. At first, he wanted to share with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, but the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden insisted that he consume it alone. "As long as you advance into the Great Saint tier, you will be able to bring us with you into the celestial realm. There are great numbers of saintly medicine in the celestial realm, so I am in no rush at all," she said. Ling Han nodded. These words were logical. Whether it was him, the Empress, or the Rain Emperor, as long as one of them had reached the Great Saint tier, they would be able to open the doors to the celestial tool, and bring a large number of people through their spatial god tool with them into the celestial realm. Of course, it was best that he become a great saint first because with his freakish nature, he would be able to enter into the heavenly tribulation again to collect the heavenly tribulation fluid after reaching the great saint tier. Even if there was no one aside from himself that could consume this substance within the Genesis tier, they could still drink it after advancing into celestial level, right? Though the lightning element regulations of the immortal realm indeed could not be compared with the celestial realms, they had the same roots, though the former had a lower level, and belonged to the basics. However, if he managed to grasp the basics, then when he referred to the lightning element regulations of the celestial realm in future, he naturally would be able to slowly improve upon them. He consumed the death mushroom. This thing looked disgusting, and tasted very disgusting as well. Even if the harmful substances inside had been removed, there was still a rank stench to it. It did not have any of the refreshing aroma that other saintly medicine should have at all. Ling Han didn't even chew, and directly swallowed down this saintly medicine. He channeled his cultivation technique, and began to refine the medicinal effects. In only a short while, a powerful energy surged fiercely inside his body. Ling Han quickly guided the medicinal effects so that more stars would be born in the silvery river inside his dantian. On the other side, innumerable regulations also appeared in Ling Han's mind, looking like a deluge of heavenly flowers that could not be grasped at all. That was because this death mushroom had not been nurtured from the body of a saint king, but rather from a more powerful being. That person's comprehension in terms of regulations was too high, belonging to a level that Ling Han could not understand at all. Never mind. Ling Han only needed accumulation of origin power. With the reincarnation tree in his possession, the comprehension of regulations was instead a small matter. He refined the medicinal effects, and the stars in his body were forming at a frightening rate. 60 million, 70 million, 80 million. The effect that saintly medicine had on the increase of accumulation of origin power was actually not very good, but this was a saint king medicine. Furthermore, Ling Han himself was only a medium saint, and he could withstand the violent medicinal effects with the strength of his physique, and this led to a rate of advancement that others could only envy. Finally, the number of stars stopped at 99,999,999, and he was only a single star away from reaching the extreme of the medium saint tier, but this last star was relatively harder to form. Ling Han went into seclusion for 15 days, and only then did he manage to succeed in this feat. He presently had the qualification to break through to the great saint tier. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. If this mystery realm had not been there, then everyone would be able to more or less make their preparations for entering into the celestial realm, yet now he still had to find the Empress and the others. However, on the other hand, if this mystery realm had not existed, he could not possibly have reached the pinnacle of the medium saint tier so quickly either. He exited the Black Tower. Attempting to break through to the great saint tier required sufficient comprehension. Even with the help of the reincarnation tree, the time he needed would number in years at least, so how could he make the attempt with a worried heart? Now that he had reached the pinnacle of the medium saint tier, his personal battle prowess was close to a peak stage saint king's. Even if he did not rely on his killing formations, he would be overwhelmingly strong. Now, though the killing formations were still very strong, they could only be considered an addition to what was already perfected. For a cultivator, the most important is still his own strength. Ling Han said internally. Killing formations could be used as a supplementary strength, but he definitely could not become reliant on them, just like how he could not hide in the Black Tower the moment he encountered any danger. He exited the Black Tower, and the 5 of them left the Yuan tribe and continued their journey. They followed the river's course, their destination being the source. The Yuan tribe that was furthest downriver already had 5 Saint King level elites that could reach peak stage Saint King's level with a further boost of power, or even be stronger than that. Then, just how strong would those tribes in the middle course and upper course be? Ling Han had asked closely, but the Yuan tribe could not possibly enter the middle course zone. Thus, the only thing they knew was the strength of the over dozen tribes nearest to them downriver. The strongest already had 10 Saint Kings. Perhaps the tribes living upriver might even have 100 Saint Kings. At least presently, Ling Han did not want to touch such a massive problem. No matter what, he had to find the Empress and the others before anything else. Thus, he also warned Xiao Gu many times not to easily move at all times and expose itself. It was still willing to listen to Ling Han's words. It called out "Yaya" while repeatedly nodding, expressing that it would hold back from making a move. They did not create trouble on their journey, and merely journeyed according to the river's course. Occasionally, they would still encounter the locals. They would avoid them if possible, but if evasion was impossible, they would quickly end the battle. As long as they were not Saint King level opponents, they could still easily deal with them with Ling Han's present battle prowess. However, the further they traveled, the more difficult the journey became. This great river was incredibly important to the natives. The lower course was still fine, but from the middle course onwards, there were elites overseeing the river banks. If one wanted to travel according to the river's course, they would have to get through these elites. Not only were there elites, there were also killing formations that were completely different from the formations of the ancient realm and possessed astonishing might. Should he take a different path, or barge through directly? Ling Han began to consider the matter. Chapter 1655, Upper Course Tribes. Ling Han decided to first take a different path. Otherwise, negotiations would still take time, so it would be better to take a detour, saving time and effort. But he soon realized that this was not a realistic strategy. When they came to the middle course, there was only a long, narrow plain on this side of the river, with tall mountains by the side. At present, the plain had been occupied by the various tribes, so if he wanted to take a different path, he would have to pass through the mountains. However, the mountain path would be too difficult to travel. Not only would he have to circle around a very far distance, it was not peaceful in the mountains either, as there were peak stage Saint King level demonic beasts. True, all the tribes lived by the river course so that other tribes would not have the chance to obtain the river water from further up the river course, so how could they possibly allow others to easily travel via a different path? Then they would just have to stick to the same path. Ling Han told Xiao Gu not to imitate the speech of others no matter what. Wasn't imitating their speech in front of saint-level elites an insult to them? Furthermore, this guy was getting more and more fluent in its words recently. It did not even pause in its words now, and was very fast even when it was repeating the words of others. The first middle course tribe they encountered was called the Yu tribe. A great formation rippled. With the great river as its foundations, its power also originating from the river flow, and sharing the same origins as the cultivation system here, it belonged to a completely new formation system. What Ling Han had previously learnt was completely useless here. If he wanted to unravel the formation, he could only barge through with brute force. All of you, follow behind me, Ling Han said. The strength of this formation should be comparable to an early stage Saint King's, and was definitely not something that the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others could stand against. In Xiao Gu's case, it would not be convenient for it to make a move. Otherwise, there would be no need for them to negotiate. Not only would they have to battle all the way through, they would also alert all the tribes which would begin hunting them down. Long Xiangyue had long since entered into the spatial god tool. The four of them followed behind Ling Han, with Xiao Gu bringing up the rear. It was powerful enough, so if any unexpected situation happened, it could take care of their group from the rear while Ling Han would be in charge in the front. Ling Han waved a palm, splitting the formation open, and calmly entered. Whether it was a formation or attack, they all had one basic rule, and that was that strength was the most important factor. At present, Ling Han's power was close to a peak stage Saint King's. Thus, he did not have to be concerned which system the formation belonged to, nor did he have to look for any kind of weakness, and only had to break it open with brute force. Suppressed under his frightening power, the power of the formation could not corrode them. It was like the formation itself was a sea, and they had gained the ability to avoid the water, forcibly setting up a safe passageway through the water. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others all clicked their tongues in amazement. The violent power of the formation was roaring 2 or 3 feet away from them, yet could not approach them in the slightest. Humph, who dares barge into our Yu tribe? A cold voice rang out, sounding out in everyone's minds through divine sense. Ling Han smiled slightly. Friend, we only want to pass by, please accommodate us. Outsiders? This voice paused slightly, seeming to be considering. After a while, it finally exclaimed, you all have to travel by the river course, and cannot veer off the path. If you enter into our tribe, then don't blame us for being rude. This meant that he was going to let them pass. Ling Han nodded. This was not because that man was easy to deal with, but rather the strength that he showed was powerful enough, so the former agreed to have them pass through to prevent any accidents from happening for no reason. If it had been the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others asking for passage outside the formation, this man would have ignored them. Only with enough strength did one's words have adequate weight. Otherwise, it would only be shouting that would serve no purpose. Ling Han naturally did not point that out. This kind of matter needed a tacit mutual understanding. He strode over, and suddenly discovered that the might of the formation had weakened considerably. Clearly, that person from the Yu tribe had deliberately controlled the formation, showing them benevolence. "Many thanks, friend," Ling Han said with a smile. The person did not speak, and remained silent. In only about 15 minutes' time, they had already exited the formation. A boundless plain appeared in front of them. This area actually still belonged to the territory of the Yu tribe, but the formation would ordinarily be used to guard against the tribes from the lower course, so there was no protective formation set up here. When they headed further up, and exited the territory of the Yu tribe, they would see the formation that had been laid out by the next tribe, which was used to guard against the Yu tribe. Ling Han stopped, and smilingly said to Xiao Gu, "Xiao Gu has performed well this time. Humph, who dares barge into our Yu tribe?" "Friend, I only want to." Ling Han had just spoken up when Xiao Gu immediately imitated his speech impatiently, repeating the words of Ling Han and that member from the Yu tribe again, involuntarily causing the four of them to erupt in laughter. Apparently, Xiao Gu had controlled itself with much difficulty previously, and thus was impatiently imitating speech again. After Xiao Gu had finished repeating their words, it looked blankly at the four of them. "Why are you laughing?" It slanted its head to one side. "Yeah." It then began laughing dumbly as well. After a day of travel, another formation appeared in front of them. The five of them still barged through forcefully. That was the territory of the Tong tribe. Thankfully, the elite that was in charge of the formation had no desire to start a battle, and after Ling Han said a few polite words, he allowed them to pass through, but he was not as benevolent as that person from the Yu tribe. He did not weaken the might of the formation, and only acted as if he did not see the five of them. Their luck was not too bad. They only had to politely say a few words, and they would be allowed to pass. However, when they entered the upper course area, they encountered trouble at the first passing. Scram! When they entered into the formation, they immediately heard a sharp rebuke ring out. Ling Han frowned. From the very beginning, this was their attitude. It looked like it would be slightly difficult for them to ask for passage. The upper course tribes were too overbearing. "Friend, we are only asking to pass through," he stated calmly. "I told you all to scram, did you not hear me?" The person's tone was very provoking. "Ho, I do not know how to scram, so forgive me for not obeying." Ling Han strode over, his anger also spiking. "Insolence." The person sneered. Boom, a burst of great power suddenly came from the formation. A pitch-black wild beast suddenly appeared, and pounced to attack Ling Han and the others. This wild beast looked like a giant lion, but it had a pair of horns on its head and as many as 9 tails. It clearly had been produced from that person actively channeling the formation, starting an offensive towards Ling Han and the others. Ling Han flicked out a finger. Wang, sword chi surged out, dazzling the skies, and splitting this fierce beast in two. However, it had been formed from the Great Formation, so even if it was cut in half, it would not die. Instead, it would absorb the power of the formation, and when it was split, it would become 2 fierce beasts. This is the 10,000 manifestations Great Formation. The more you all resist, the greater the power will be provoked from the formation. You are all merely seeking death. The person laughed. Despicable outsiders, all of you will die. From his tone, it seemed that he was filled with fury towards outsiders. Perhaps he had suffered at the hands of outsiders previously, and was thus venting his hatred on Ling Han and his group. Ling Han spread out his divine sense. Though the power of the formation was very strong, and would cause damage to one's spirit, his present divine sense was incredibly resilient, so he was not afraid at all. He forcibly spread out his divine sense within the formation. This was not an illusion formation, so Ling Han soon located the person who was controlling a large man wearing a feathered crown on his head and whose upper body was bare. Because he was presently channeling the formation with his full effort, the black rings on him had also appeared. 9 rings, and the 9th ring was clearly not dark enough. His cultivation level probably should be equivalent to middle stage Great Saint tier. Humph, You actually dare release your divine sense towards here. Are you dissatisfied that you are not dying fast enough? The large man also discovered Ling Han was spying on him. He immediately clenched his fist, and shot out a punch at Ling Han's divine sense. Xiao, Ling Han immediately withdrew his divine sense, and menacingly declared, I am coming to find you now. Chapter 1656, Breaking the Formation. Ling Han turned around, and headed in the direction of the large man. His speed was astonishingly swift, and even the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others had slight difficulty following him. They saw him throwing out punches repeatedly, destroying each of the fierce beasts that attacked them with a single punch. The consequence that this led to was indeed the ever-increasing number of the fierce beasts as they consistently pounced on them. Every fierce beast that the formation gave rise to had the battle prowess of an early-stage Saint King. It was still fine if there were only a few, but after the number had reached a few hundred, the battle prowess definitely could be compared to that of a peak-stage Saint King, and even Ling Han would have to expend slightly more effort. More importantly, the number of the fierce beasts was continuously increasing. The large man that was controlling the formation smirked coldly. How can you possibly reach me if you barge around forcefully like that? It would not even be a third of the way here, and you would be surrounded by the fierce beasts, like a tiger that would be torn apart by a pack of wolves. However, Ling Han's strength had far surpassed the large man's expectations. Only when he had traveled 4/5 of the way was Ling Han surrounded by an ocean of fierce beasts, and was not able to take another step further. Ha ha ha, I really have never seen someone as stupid as you. The large man scoffed in derisive laughter. This formation was unique. There was no future in breaking the formation by force, and the best strategy would be to actively weaken one's cultivation level, and merely stay on the defense, making no move to attack to prevent more formation beasts from appearing. Only then would one have the chance to walk out of the great formation. But in that way, the man guarding the formation would only have to unleash a fierce offensive, and he would be able to fluster the person who had entered the formation completely. So, there was a choice. Would you release your full strength, or not? Ling Han paid him no regard. He merely shot out punches continuously, destroying each and every fierce beast, and causing the formation to give rise to even more. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others were all confused by his actions. Aren't you simply asking for trouble like this? Ling Han only rained down blows. By now, the number of fierce beasts was more than 100,000. Though it was impossible that they would all attack at the same time, when several hundred or several thousand attacked simultaneously, this was still enough to make a peak-stage Saint King sweat. But when Ling Han destroyed another fierce beast, the fierce beast that had been turned into over 100 pieces still wanted to form their respective bodies again, yet it only turned into multiple masses of black chi that was continuously struggling. They did not immediately form over 100 new fierce beasts like how they had before. Not only that, even the over 100,000 fierce beasts that had already formed did not attack again. Instead, it was like they had become drunk, and were stumbling and shaky in their steps. What was going on here? The heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others all looked at Ling Han with surprise. Ling Han stopped and said, whether it is a formation or a human being, there is always an upper limit. No matter how strong your potential is, when you are forced to the end of the line, you will immediately crumble. A formation is the same. When it is forced to its limits, it would automatically collapse. And as if they were an explanatory note for his words, thunderous booms were heard when he had just finished his words. The great formation had collapsed on its own, and those fierce beasts had all exploded one after another. Though Ling Han did not know this formation of a different system, he could be considered a grandmaster in terms of formations, and all formations had one common characteristic, and that was that they all had upper limits. Once you broke this upper limit, the formation would naturally be broken. Boom, the great formation collapsed. In the distance, the large man whose upper body was bare was revealed to their eyes. He looked completely dumbfounded. Though he had heard Ling Han's explanation, he did not feel that his doubts had been answered at all. Instead, he looked like he had seen a ghost. Are you a freak? It sounded simple, but to be able to force a formation to its upper limit, one would first have to be able to sustain the power of the great formation before that limit was reached. Even the tribe's several elders were unable to accomplish that, even the tribal chief could not. This young outsider actually had battle prowess on the level of the tribal chief. This was too terrifying. Ling Han stretched out a hand and grabbed that man over, and asked, "Have you been bitten by a dog or something? Why do you hate outsiders so much?" The reason why he had such a guess was because the large black dog and the others had all entered here, and with how despicable that dog was, it would not be a strange thing for this large man to suffer a bit. Just after he said this, he saw that the large man actually flushed bright red, seeming to feel both humiliated and furious. This. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. His guess had actually been on the mark. "Don't laugh," the large man roared loudly, and tried to kill Ling Han as if he had put his life on the line. Yet he only had the battle prowess on the level of a great saint, so how could he possibly be a match for Ling Han? Ling Han casually pressed down a hand. "Pa!" That man was instantly pressed onto the ground, his limbs stretched out, forming the Chinese character. "Release me, or all of you will be dead." The large man was very arrogant because this was the territory of the Zhao tribe. In their own territory, whom did he have to fear? There were a total of 27 9-ring peak stage elites, and any one of them would be able to match this young outsider. Ling Han smiled slightly, and said, "Even a captured prisoner dares to be so arrogant. Looks like you haven't had enough suffering yet. Whatever I ask, you just have to answer. Otherwise, ho, just pray for luck then." "You dare," the large man shouted. The great formation had already collapsed, so there would definitely be people coming from the tribe immediately. What did he have to fear? Ling Han smiled calmly, and said to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and Long Yushan, "The two of you, turn your heads around." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden immediately did as he said, while Long Yushan curiously asked, "Why?" "Pa." Ling Han flicked out a finger, and the clothing on the large man immediately burst to pieces. In the beginning, his upper body was already bare, and now he had become completely naked. Long Yushan hurriedly turned her head around, but her pretty face was incredibly red with embarrassment. She really wanted to pinch Ling Han severely a few times. What are you doing?" The large man's face had already turned livid. He was a great 9-ring elite, yet his clothes had actually been destroyed by another, showing something that was not appropriate to be seen. He was too embarrassed. "So small," Ling Han evaluated. "So small," Xiao Gu repeated. The large man was about to pass out. Being naked in public was bad enough, and they were still assessing his D***CK? Furthermore, you guys had gone too far. You were even parroting each other's words. This was no way to insult another person. This was practically even crueler than that despicable dog. Ling Han smiled slightly. "Are you willing to answer questions now? Ho, otherwise, it would not be an evaluation that is coming after. I will hang you up and send you back to your tribe so everyone can observe your precious sword." "No," the large man exclaimed in a trembling voice. If that happened, how would he still have the face to see other people in the future? "Then just honestly answer the questions," Ling Han stated calmly. "How many groups of outsiders have you encountered here in total?" "Just one group," the large man hurriedly answered, having lost any intention of resisting. "Who were they?" Ling Han asked further. "There were a lot of them, at least 100. Tell me the details." When he heard the large man explain in detail, only then did Ling Han find out that 4.5 years ago, the Empress and the others had come here. Indeed, there had also been the Saint Kings from the Forbidden Lands with them, as well as some juniors, and they totaled up to about 100 people. The large black dog had also been among them, and they, just like Ling Han's group, had had a smooth journey in the beginning, but had been stopped when they had come here. The large black dog had even clashed with this man. It had quietly hidden inside the formation, and bitten off a chunk of flesh from this guy's bottom. Afterwards, through some negotiations, the Empress and the others were allowed to pass, and that large man also nurtured an extreme hatred for all outsiders. Now, Ling Han and his group had encountered him, so they naturally would suffer from him deliberately making things difficult for them. But the end result was that he experienced the second great loss that he had ever had in his lifetime. Outsiders, you have gone too far. At this time, the elites of the Zhao tribe had also rushed here, and they all glared at Ling Han and his group with menacing eyes. Chapter 1657, Ransom. The Zhao tribe mobilized a total of 6 elites. This clearly was not their full strength. They probably thought that this would be enough to suppress Ling Han and his group. Ling Han was internally displeased. His eyes swept over them, and he declared, "You guys had better not trifle with me, or he won't be the only person lying here." "How dare you?" the 6 of them rebuked at the same time. Though they were not elders, every single one of them could be called a 9 rings elite, being comparable to the early stage or even middle stage of Saint King tier. "Capture him." The 6 of them moved, and attacked Ling Han in unison. Ling Han casually grabbed the large man from before, holding his ankle. Using him like a weapon, he smashed him into the 6 elites. "Who?" He brandished the human staff in a powerfully imposing manner. The large man's expression had turned green from fear. He hurriedly channeled his strength throughout his body. Otherwise, if he was hit or struck by his clansmen, he would definitely be crushed into a bloody mush. And those 6 had no choice but to leap aside and dodge to avoid wounding their clansmen by accident. "Fighting with a hostage in hand, what kind of man are you?" they provoked. "None of your business." Ling Han gave a battle cry, and charged towards the 6 of them with his powerful weapon, wielding the large man like he was holding a sword. Wang, he actually did manage to channel sword chi through him, and it was continuously surging out of the large man's body. This caused the large man to suffer. Even if he focused all his power on defense, how could he possibly bear Ling Han's sword intent? Lacerations immediately formed in his flesh, and he was badly mutilated. Ling Han was fired up from the fight, and casually tossed the large man to one side. Then, he charged into the group of 6. Pang. Throwing out punches and kicks, he soon suppressed the 6 of them. With his extreme speed, there was no one that could manage to escape. Xiao Gu watched from the sidelines, its head slanted to one side. At present it was like a sponge, continuously absorbing everything around it, and in its heart, Ling Han clearly had the greatest influence on it, so every move and gesture it had was a copy of Ling Han's. Ling Han stood, his hands crossed behind his back. Since things had reached this point, he did not want to easily stop either. After a while, more elites came from the Zhao tribe. There were even more this time round, and had reached 100. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. There really were a lot of elites here. These 100 people were all 9 rings elites, and there were even over a dozen of them whose 9 rings were all black as ink. They had reached the level of peak stage Saint King. Seeing so many fated enemies, Xiao Gu's eyes had already turned green. Thankfully, it still remembered Ling Han's words. It lowered its head, and did not make any move, nor did it allow others to discover its unusual state. Its intelligence was gradually increasing, also becoming more human-like. "Release the hostages," an old man who wore a feathered crown that was 15 meters tall spoke up. His feathered crown was the longest. Clearly, he was the chief of the Zhao tribe. His face was ice-cold, his eyes burning with flames of rage that blazed like lightning. Ling Han shook his head, and answered, "Old man, I do not like your commanding tone. Change your attitude before you speak again. You're courting death." An elder moved. Hong, as a giant hand stretched out, multiple black veined patterns appeared, and the sun, moon, and stars could vaguely be seen, but it was a completely different cultivation technique from the ancient realm. Ling Han shot out his own punch, striving against the incoming attack, and not backing down the slightest bit. Boom! After the clash, that elder's figure wavered, and he revealed a sliver of surprise in his expression. In his eyes, Ling Han's aura was considerably weaker than his own. Previously, he had exchanged blows with outsiders, so even though they did not belong to the same system of cultivation, it helped him to make a judgment of Ling Han's strength. But this exchange of blows was far beyond his expectations. The other party was actually not the slightest bit weaker than himself. Ahem. The chief of the Zhao tribe opened his mouth. He stretched out a hand and made a pressing gesture with it, signaling that elder not to make any further moves. He said, "Outsider, if you want to ask for passage, we will allow you to pass. Release the hostages immediately, and make your apologies to us, in accompaniment with some gifts to show your apology." "Chief," all the elders exclaimed in shock. Wasn't this letting them off too lightly? The Zhao tribe's chief shook his head slightly, and softly said, "Focus on the greater picture." Recently, they were mulling over starting a war with the Lang tribe, and they naturally could not allow any unexpected events to take place at this point in time. After all, Ling Han had already proven that his strength could not be underestimated. All the elders were extremely angry, but did not voice out any more objection. They all secretly decided that when Ling Han and his group returned, they would definitely teach them a lesson. He wanted to explore the secret of the source of the upper course. He had to be delusional. All the ancestors of the various tribes had long since worked together to explore that place, but they were not allowed to approach at all. Forcefully barging in would only lead to death, and the final result for Ling Han and his group of outsiders would only be to come back the same way they had come. They all looked at Ling Han. These people were really let off too lightly. They would be allowed to live a few more days. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Please do not misunderstand. I have not come to ask for passage. These 7 people are presently all hostages, so name your offer. If I am satisfied with the price, I will return them to you. Otherwise, they will be killed on the spot, freshness guaranteed." "You actually dare to blackmail us?" All the elites of the Zhao tribe were furious, and even the chief of the Zhao tribe had a dark expression as he revealed a menacing killing intent. His previous compromise had not been because he was afraid of Ling Han, but rather because he had not wanted to affect the planned attack against the Lang tribe. Was he seeking death? "Take him down," the Zhao tribe chief commanded coldly, having finally lost all his patience. "6, let's attack together." An elder walked out. He was the 7th elder of the Zhao tribe, and was brothers with the 6th elder. The 2 of them working together also had the best coordination. "All right." The 6th elder also walked out. The 2 of them stood side by side, staring at Ling Han with eyes filled with ice, their faces expressionless, as if Ling Han was already a dead man. Ling Han smiled slightly, and used the immovable deity metal body mystical power. 6 arms stretched out at the same time, grabbing the 6 hostages on the ground, wielding them like weapons. "Come on, then. This. You are too shameless, actually using the hostages as weapons. Furthermore, it is already bad enough that you grabbed 2 of them, but you actually grabbed 6 of them. If it wasn't because you only have 6 arms, would you also be grabbing that last hostage?" This thought also streaked through Ling Han's mind. He couldn't help but think, since he could form 4 additional arms, then could he advance a step further, and have this number reach as many as 6, 8, or even more? He could give it a try. Perhaps he would have to spend endless time on it, but it was worth the attempt, wasn't it? The 6th elder and 7th elder did not move for fear of harming the hostages, and did not dare to make any moves at all. They only stood there, looking at Ling Han dumbly. They had never seen such a shameless person. Ling Han said, "If we're not fighting, then let's discuss the ransom. If it's too low, then don't blame me for killing the hostages." All the elites of the Zhao tribe looked livid, but even if it was easy for elites to appear here, there were still very few that had reached 9 rings. They belonged to talent that could definitely not be allowed to be lost, because there were still other tribes further down the river course that were eyeing them hungrily. If their strength was the slightest bit weakened, they would launch an offensive against them without hesitation, and replace them. Some had only been defeated, and retreated further down the river course, but there were some that had directly been wiped out, and disappeared in the passage of history. 100 top-grade godly medicines, the Zhao tribe chief said, and he threw a large pile of godly medicines with a wave of his right hand in front of him. Because there was an extremely large amount of them, one could visibly see the clear interweaving of divine light among them. Yet Ling Han scoffed, and said, "Do you think I am a beggar? You just plan to dismiss me with such paltry things?" These godly medicines were only level 16 at most. He suddenly moved, and tore off the arm of a hostage, which he tossed at the elites of the Zhao tribe. Chapter 1658, Exchange. For elites, regrowing a severed arm was not a big deal, but Ling Han doing such a thing was to tell them that he had no scruples. He dared to tear off his arm now, and he would dare twist off his head next. "What do you want?" the Zhao tribe chief asked coldly, and they could clearly feel that he had seriously been angered by now. Once they managed to retrieve the hostages, he would kill Ling Han. The war with the Lang tribe could be set aside first. The Zhao tribe had never been bullied like this by anyone before. If their anger could not be vented, then there would be no need for their survival any longer. The other elders also had the same thoughts. "You can be as arrogant as you like now, but you will definitely be crying later." Ling Han thought for a moment, and then answered, 10 saintly medicines. "Impossible." The Zhao tribe chief immediately shook his head. He had to be joking. Did he think that saintly medicines were as common as cabbages in the field? Even if there were abundant resources here, saintly medicines were still incredibly precious. Ling Han compromised, and said, 7. 1 in exchange for each person. "You guys won't say that a saint is not even worth a saintly medicine?" The elites of the Zhao tribe all knew that saints meant 9 rings elites. They naturally would not say no. In truth, even with the help of the Great River, becoming a Ning Rings elite was still very, very difficult, and the chances of success would be considerably increased with the help of saintly medicine. "At most 1, the Zhao tribe chief declared resolutely. There were only a total of 3 saintly medicines in the tribe, and they were only medium saint tier. Ling Han looked at his expression, and knew that this was already his limit. Furthermore, if it was not because he was planning to snatch back the saintly medicine after he rescued the hostages, he would not be willing to even make such a compromise. He smiled, and said, 1 saintly medicine is too little, throw another 6 saintly materials into the bargain. Fuck. The elites of the Zhao tribe were all furious. You really aren't reserved at all, huh? You think saintly medicine and saintly material are things that can be found anywhere? The Zhao tribe chief paused for a while, yet still nodded, and answered, fine. He was unwilling to hand out more saintly medicines because he worried that Ling Han would consume it. Then, even if they killed Ling Han, and split open his stomach, they would not be able to retrieve the saintly medicine. The loss would be too massive, but saintly material was different. Would he be able to consume it? Putting aside the question of consuming it, even if it was thrown onto the ground, it would be undamaged. In that case, so what if they gave it to him? They would be giving in this moment, and getting it back in the next. All the elders also immediately thought of this, and made no further objections. Let's exchange, then. The Zhao tribe chief drew out a saintly medicine and 6 pieces of saintly material, which he tied together with his spiritual power, and pushed towards Ling Han. Ling Han also used his origin power to tie up the 7 hostages, whom he then pushed towards the side of the Zhao tribe chief. The 2 sides let go at the same time. Ling Han immediately drew the saintly medicine and saintly material into the Black Tower. With the help of another saintly medicine, he would be able to shrink the time needed to advance into the Great Saint Tier by a considerable few times. Once he had advanced into the Great Saint Tier, who would be a match for him in the entire ancient realm? Move. The Zhao tribe chief was the first to pounce, launching an offensive at Ling Han. As his spiritual power was channeled, multiple black patterns appeared on his whole body. They were completely incompatible with the ancient realm. It could be imagined that if he ever left this place, he would definitely be targeted by the heaven and earth. Even the people of the netherworld would have their netherworld regulations erased if they ever went to the immortal realm, what more when this was a completely different cultivation system. Perhaps this was also why none of the natives had ever left even when the mystery realm had clearly been open for quite a few years. If they left this place, even 9 Rings elites could possibly be unable to sustain even a single blow, because it was possible that even their power would be erased. Yaya! Xiao Gu released a furious roar. It had already held back for a very long time, but now that so many elites had revealed an aura that it despised, they had finally pushed its self-restraint to its limits. Wang, it released a green light, which became an attack that shot towards the Zhao tribe chief. Green light. Destroyer. When the elites of the Zhao tribe saw this, they immediately gasped in shock. Recently, there had been rumors that the legendary destroyer had appeared. They had thought nothing of it, and thought that it was only complete nonsense that had been passed down from the ancient times, but now? The myth had become reality. Charge. Their killing intent immediately blazed. According to the legends, the person that could use green light would bring devastating disaster to all the tribes. All of you, step aside. Ling Han said to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others so that they would not be captured by the Zhao tribe and used to threaten him. N. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others all stepped back. They were all saints, so if they were well prepared, they could break into a run and open the path at any time. Then, aside from Ling Han, who had cultivated extreme speed, there was no other existence that could be a threat to them. Ling Han and Xiao Gu joined forces, battling the elites of the Zhao tribe fiercely. This time, the number of elites from the Zhao tribe had far exceeded the Yuan tribes. There were more than 20 elites with peak stage Saint King level battle prowess, and added with the power boost, their battle prowess was even more frightening. Even such big shots like the Blue Feather Saint King would pale in shock, and could only turn and flee. But compared with the battle with the Yuan tribe, Ling Han had already become considerably stronger, advancing from the peak of the middle stage of medium Saint Tier to the peak stage of medium Saint Tier, while his battle prowess had reached peak stage Saint King, and added with the killing formations, he, too, was far stronger than any ordinary peak stage Saint King. Xiao Gu was already exerting its full effort. It had drawn out its true form, a crystalline white bone which was exuding a green light, and had terrifying destructive power. But even when Ling Han used all his techniques, the two of them were still at a disadvantage. There were really too many elites from the opposing side, which had reached the extent of a qualitative change, and there were even more elites joining the battle, while the Great Formation was also being recovered. The circumstances were becoming more and more unfavorable for Ling Han and his group. A thought flashed in Ling Han's head, and he immediately leaped back. Using lightning flash, there was no one that was capable of stopping him at all. He stretched out a hand and pressed down on the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others. Don't resist. These words were spoken to Long Yushan. Shio. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the notionless saint were immediately drawn into the black tower, but Long Yushan was not. She was a saint, so she instinctively would have resistance towards others' will. Ling Han did not bother to waste his breath. He directly moved to knock her out, then destroyed her spatial god tool, and released Long Xianyue. Without waiting for the latter to speak, he did the same to her that he did to her aunt, and drew both women into the black tower. If Long Xianyue knew, she would definitely be very depressed because no matter what Ling Han did to her, how could she possibly resist? Ling Han charged back and exclaimed, Xiao Gu, don't resist. He wanted to take Xiao Gu into the black tower as well, but he could not, because he was unable to wrap Xiao Gu in his divine sense. It was as if the other's whole body was covered with sharp spikes. The slightest touch, and he would be covered all over with wounds. Xiao Gu looked at him blankly. What was the meaning of don't resist? It could not understand these words. Ling Han frowned, and declared, let's go. Xiao Gu could understand these words, and it immediately ran off with Ling Han. It might be cute, but it was not dumb at all. It could still understand the difference between strength and weakness. If they were outmatched, it was natural that they would have to run. In future, they could still come back to redeem their pride. Ling Han grabbed Xiao Gu, and rapidly broke through the siege using lightning flash and fled. Even if there were more than 100 saint-level elites surrounding them, it was useless. In front of his extreme speed, numbers had completely lost their meaning. Ah! Behind them, the furious shouts of the elites of the Zhao tribe rang out. Even in such a situation, they still managed to flee. Ling Han smirked internally. This time, it was him fleeing, but when he had digested that saintly medicine, and advanced into the great saint tier, he would make a powerful comeback. By that time, you bastards just wait to be pummeled. Chapter 1659, Return of Great Saint. After throwing off their pursuers, Ling Han had Xiao Gu wait by one side, whilst he entered into the Black Tower. Ling Han. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the notionless saint approached him. Ling Han nodded, and said, I am going into seclusion for a period of time. He came to the reincarnation tree, and took out and consumed that saintly medicine without hesitation. Wang, the great Tao, suddenly seemed to resonate with him, and he experienced a period of consistent enlightenment. Godly medicine was a very strange existence. By itself, it basically did not have much battle prowess, and occasionally some were able to release powerful poison, or affect something like space to protect themselves, but even for saintly medicine, none had ever been able to lay claim to the title of elite. Of course, godly medicine had gained awareness, and would also gain intelligence. When they had stepped on the path of cultivation, that was a different matter. The benefit of godly medicines was that they were birthed by the heaven and earth, and contained the shards of regulations of great Tao, which would help cultivators comprehend Tao. Of course, increasing the accumulation of origin power was also one aspect of it, but it was far less important than the boost to comprehension of cultivation level. The largest effect of saintly medicine was comprehending Tao, and now Ling Han's cultivation level had reached the peak stage of the medium saint tier. He had been cultivating all these days in a place that was abundant with spiritual qi, so he had also gained enough accumulation. Once the doors to comprehension opened, he would be able to break through to the next tier. Underneath the reincarnation tree, as Ling Han refined the medicinal effects, great Tao turned into a long river that appeared in his mind. Ling Han continuously comprehended, and spiritual techniques appeared repeatedly, allowing him to float in the long river of great Tao. His accumulation of cultivation level was getting denser and denser, and when 10 days had passed in the outsider world, Ling Han suddenly exited the Black Tower. In truth, he had already comprehended Tao for 1,000 years. With the help of the saintly medicine, he had gained enough appreciation. Wang, thunderclouds rolled over, lightning dancing amidst them. That scene was enough to make anyone's hair stand on ends. Ling Han's small saint tier tribulation was comparable to great saint tier tribulation, and medium saint tier tribulation was comparable to saint king tier tribulation, and now? The heaven and earth of the immortal realm had its upper limits, so it was impossible for the might of the heavenly tribulation to increase without end. At most, it could only reach peak stage saint king tier. But if quality could not be improved, then quantity would be increased. Quang, quang, quang. 10 bolts of lightning descended at the same time, becoming 10 giants. Patterns of great Tao were entwined around each giant, and they charged towards Ling Han. Some were wielding lightning spears, while some were brandishing lightning swords, and they launched an unhesitating offensive towards Ling Han. Ling Han was unafraid. He guided the lightning into his body to temper his godly bones. He had a feeling that if he was in the immortal realm, this would be the last improvement for his godly bones. If he underwent the Saint King tier tribulation here, then the might of the heavenly tribulation would be completely inadequate to push his physique to the next level. It had to be the might of the heavenly tribulation of the celestial realm. Yaya. Xiao Gu had been seated by the sidelines all this while. Since Ling Han told it to wait, then it would wait obediently. When it saw the heavenly tribulation appear, it did not have the fear that others would feel, but rather rushed forwards excitedly, seeming to be quite intrigued. However, as long as it did not disturb the heavenly tribulation would ignore it as well, which made it very depressed. Why were these lightning giants unwilling to play around with it? Xiao Gu, step out, Ling Han said. He guided the power of lightning, and the godly bones in his body were currently advancing towards the high level of level 20 godly metal. Once he succeeded, his physique would be the sturdiest existence in the immortal realm. He would not need to fear even if there were a group of peak stage Saint Kings attacking him simultaneously. If anyone wanted to wound him, they could only slowly refine him using the power of regulation. Xiao Gu gave a yaya, and left the vicinity of the heavenly tribulation. Ling Han approached the heavenly tribulation. His godly bones were already close to level 20 previously, and after only a while of tempering, a qualitative change took place. Level 20. However, Ling Han did not stop, but rather continued to absorb the power of the heavenly tribulation, causing his godly bones to become even harder, and advancing towards the level of pseudo-divine metal. The so-called pseudo-divine metal was slowly built up from the base of level 20 godly metal so that it would improve further in quality, using the number of layers to categorize its quality. Building up another 2 layers would be 1-star pseudo-divine metal, and going by that calculation, 10-star pseudo-divine metal would be layering 11 pieces of level 20 godly metal as a single layer. This was not just simple layering, but rather merging them from the essence, where each contained the other. Furthermore, it had to be the melding of different godly metals. The same type of godly metal could not possibly be melded together. After 6 hours had passed, Ling Han did not temper his godly bones any longer, because this had already reached the limit. In this space, he could only reach the level of half-star pseudo-divine metal. Half a star, not even a full star. This was already enough. He charged towards the tribulation clouds, wanting to retrieve heavenly tribulation fluid. Immediately, the heaven and earth flew into a rage. One after another, lightning giants at the level of peak stage Saint King tier appeared, and moved to stop Ling Han from advancing further. But in front of the present Ling Han, what could they do? Pang, pang, pang. He was like a heavy chariot rolling over them. The lightning giants would only be crushed into pieces. Though the lightning giants could reform, Ling Han did not take them to heart at all. So what if you had more numbers? You would simply be crushed into smithereens. More and more lightning giants appeared, but because they were limited by the regulations of the immortal realm, peak stage Saint King tier was the maximum. At most, they could only endlessly increase their numbers, yet they had met with a freak like Ling Han. Numbers were completely meaningless in front of him. You cannot break through my defense, so even if there were billions of you, so what? He charged into the core of the tribulation clouds. Once again, a sacrificial altar appeared ahead of him. Without reservations, he went over and retrieved all the heavenly tribulation fluid in the groove. All of a sudden, the tribulation clouds dispersed. Actually, half a day's time had not passed yet, but so what? The maximum limit of their strength could no longer harm him, and even the heaven and earth had no further interest to make things difficult for him. Why did he feel like he was a bully? Ling Han scratched his head. Everyone would be shivering with fear when they spoke of the heavenly tribulation, but in his case? He actually scared off the heavenly tribulation before the time limit had been reached. He landed back on the ground, and released the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, the notionless saint, and the aunt and niece of the Long tribe from the Black Tower. However, the aunt and niece of the Long tribe were still unconscious. Ling Han shook them slightly with his origin power, and only then did they regain consciousness. Ling Han, what did you do to me? Long Yushan exclaimed in shock. She did not know how long she had been unconscious, and she worried that Ling Han might have done something unspeakable to her in this period of time. Meanwhile, Long Xiangyue's beautiful eyes shone. She very much hoped that Ling Han had done something to her that he would have to be responsible for. Ling Han chuckled, and declared, "Come, let's charge back." Ling Han, I asked you a question. Long Yushan involuntarily raised her voice when she saw that Ling Han did not answer her question. Ling Han's eyes turned cold. Wang, a frightening pressure surged out, and Long Yushan's legs involuntarily became weak. She actually flopped onto the ground. I was polite towards you, but you should not overstep your boundaries, either. From now onwards, we will go our separate ways. Ling Han, don't blame my auntie. She just has a stubborn tongue, but has no malicious intent. Long Xiangyue hurriedly said. Meanwhile, Long Yushan was biting firmly on her lower lip. Her personality was a proud one, and she would definitely not yield. Ling Han shook his head, his demeanor determined. Though he had gotten a dragon's horn from the other party, he had also solved an unwanted betrothal for her. Furthermore, he had even become deadly foes with the Open Cloud's forbidden land because of it. If it were not because he had wanted to kill the Open Cloud's king in the first place, who would have settled for that kind of business deal? He did not owe Long Yushan anything. You can have the temper of a young mistress, and throw your temper around at whomever you like, but I am not going to be the one to bear with your temper. He turned around and left. The notionless saint and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden ignored Long Yushan as well. They only nodded at Long Xiangyue before leaving, closely following in Ling Han's footsteps. Only Xiao Gu was a bit confused about the situation. It gave a yaya, and then ran after Ling Han. Chapter 1660, It's my turn, right? Ling Han had not walked back too long when he encountered a group from the Zhao tribe. When they discovered that the destroyer, the Zhao tribe had also resolutely given up their plans of attacking the Lang tribe. Instead, they communicated with the Lang tribe, and the two great tribes sent out their own elites to search for Xiao Gu in this expansive area. As for Ling Han, he was an extra, and could be killed as they liked. In the ancestral teachings of every tribe, there were instructions regarding the destroyer, and that was to kill it at all costs. There were a total of 10 people in this group from the Zhao tribe, with a 9 rings elite leading the team. When he discovered Ling Han, he was startled at first. He had not thought that he could strut right out in front of them. Thus, that 9 rings elite faltered for a moment. Only then did he release a battle cry, sending out a summoning signal. Ling Han did not stop him. That would be just right for him, having all of them gather so he could kill them all in one go. Not too long later, multiple figures shot out and arrived. They were all 9 rings elites, and there were more of them that were 7 or 8 rings elites that were rushing towards them from all directions. However, they had not come to encircle and annihilate Ling Han and Xiao Gu, but were helping out in the search. Very good. He knows he can't escape, so he has come out to meet his death, an elder from the Zhao tribe exclaimed, his expression livid. Meanwhile, Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and he smilingly said, not everyone is here yet, so let's just wait a while longer. Ridiculous. An elite moved, his spiritual power condensing to form a black-colored giant elephant, which charged out to crush Ling Han. He was an elite of the Lang tribe, and had never exchanged blows with Ling Han before. As he saw it, this kind of minor character would naturally be suppressed with a single palm strike from him. Ling Han's figure flashed and dodged this blow. He calmly said, I have always been a reasonable man, and will always give others the opportunity to choose. Now, those that are not willing to become my enemy can immediately retreat. Otherwise, when I make my move, those that are still here are all my enemies. The members of the Lang tribe and Zhao tribe all sneered. For someone who was only the equivalent of the late stage of 9 rings, he still dared to boast so shamelessly. I will also give you a choice. Kneel down and kowtow 100 times, and I can spare your lowly life, that elite from the Lang tribe declared coldly. Ling Han sighed, and said, do you know that you are very irritating? He flicked a finger, and shio, a flash of sword light shot out. Its speed was astonishingly fast, and before anyone managed to react, it had come out through the back of the head of that elite from the Lang tribe. This elite of the Lang tribe wore a completely vacant expression, his eyes rapidly becoming dim. Pa, He collapsed onto the ground, fresh blood gushing out from him. He was already dead. Gasp. Instantly, there was a dead silence. This was a peak stage 9 rings elite, yet he was actually insta-killed with a single strike. This was too terrifying. How could this be? Clearly, only the man with green light was the destroyer. They only had to kill him before he could get strong enough. Why was this guy even more frightening? Everyone couldn't help but take a step back, and there were some that were more cowardly that were already screaming sharply, breaking into a run. Ling Han's eyes were cold. He had already given these people a chance. Since you guys want to kill me, then you would have to be prepared to be counter-killed. How could there be something so good in this world? He flicked his finger repeatedly. Multiple flashes of sword chi danced out, and the members of the Zhao and Lang tribe collapsed one after another. Gather together, an elite shouted loudly. This reminded all of them, and they all gathered together, but in this process, at least half of them died. Impossible. The elders from the Zhao tribe all gasped. 10 days ago, he had still been forced to flee from our pursuit. How has he become so powerful now? The members of the Lang tribe wanted to cry. They should not have gotten involved in this messy situation. What business was it of theirs? Now, what were they supposed to do? All the elites joined forces, and finally managed to block Ling Han's attacks. There were about 20 peak stage 9 rings elites, and this was still very effective. And there were others rushing here. When the chiefs of the Lang tribe and Zhao tribe arrived together, everyone finally felt relief. They felt as if their pillar of support was here, and calmed down greatly. This brat. The Zhao tribe chief saw the corpses littered all over the ground, and his expression involuntarily became livid. At least half of them were elites from the Zhao tribe, yet now they had all been eliminated. In future, putting aside the question of replacing the Lang tribe, they could even be overthrown by the tribes from the middle course. He shouted loudly. Boom, he drew all the power of the tribe into his body, madly increasing his battle prowess. Multiple black patterns surged out from his body, forming many black chains. Die, he roared loudly. Those black chains immediately moved, shooting rapidly towards Ling Han, and intending to punch right through his body. Ling Han didn't even bother to dodge, and allowed these chains to hit him. Ding, 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 ding. When the metal chains struck him, only multiple sparks were created from the friction. They were unable to wound him the slightest bit. What? The elites from the 2 tribes who had just soothed their military morale once again experienced having their hearts drop to rock bottom. Such a powerful attack did not even manage to penetrate Ling Han's defenses. This was practically enough to destroy all their hopes. The Zhao tribe chief gritted his teeth, and the metal chains suddenly wrapped tightly around Ling Han like snakes. Winding round and round, soon enough only Ling Han's head was left visible. Though they had a different cultivation system, they similarly had to accumulate spiritual power and their appreciation of great Tao. The difference was that what they comprehended was not the regulations of the ancient realm, but rather the regulations flowing in that great river at the side. Those chains were formed by the regulations that he had comprehended, and had reached the peak stage of 9 rings. He was sure that Ling Han definitely could not possibly struggle free. Who asked this brat to be too arrogant? Move quickly, I have trapped him, the Zhao tribe chief called out loudly. Charge. The Lang tribe chief and the elites of the 2 tribes moved at the same time, charging towards Ling Han. At this time, the threat that Ling Han posed had already exceeded Xiao Gu, and he definitely had to be killed. Yaya. Xiao Gu released a furious roar. It, too, charged out. Meanwhile, the notionless saint and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden did not move. Firstly, they would only be going to their deaths if they did, and secondly, they were filled with confidence in Ling Han. Since he had done this, he definitely had enough certainty to succeed. About 40 peak stage 9 rings elites charged, all using their strongest attacks, which they barraged Ling Han with. Ling Han broke into a grin. How many peak stage Saint Kings had there been in that heavenly tribulation previously? Their number had exceeded the tribe's ranks by who knew how many times, yet hadn't he still dealt with them easily? Peng, 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 peng. Innumerable attacks poured out, and even the earth itself was shaking. If it were not for the fact that this was very likely a part of the celestial realm, this earth could not possibly have sustained such an impact. Even so, there were still copious amounts of dust and soil flying, covering the skies. They blasted Ling Han for at least 10 breaths' time, and some of them finally slowly stopped. When the last person also stopped attacking, the dust gradually settled, and their sight became clear again. However, when they could see clearly, everyone was close to despair. Ling Han was still tied up in the chains, yet looked completely at ease. If it wasn't for the fact that the chains wrapped around him were extremely damaged, who would believe that he had been simultaneously attacked by 49 Rings elites just moments ago? It's my turn, right? Ling Han asked smilingly. He moved lightly, and the chains entrapping him broke apart. He stood there in his black clothes, elegant and confident. Chapter 1661, Great River Tribes. All the elites of the two tribes were numb with shock. They felt a strong coldness stream through their bodies, making them feel as if they were close to passing out. Was this guy really human? Being simultaneously attacked by about 49 Rings elites, he was actually completely unscathed. The ancestral teachings said that the person who could use green light was the destroyer, but their ancestors must have not seen the complete twists of Fati. It was not the green light user himself that brought destruction, but rather the man that was with him. Ling Han strode over, his black clothes fluttering in the breeze, yet his expression was filled with killing intent. He had never killed mindlessly, but when others had already offended him, it naturally was illogical for him to still be merciful and kind. Outsider, do you want to make an enemy of all the great river tribes? The Lang tribe chief asked coldly, his expression seemingly very calm, but anyone could hear that sliver of shakiness in his tone. This kind of strength had far surpassed his imagination, and there was not the slightest chance for him to be a match for him. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "Your words are incorrect. It should be your great river tribes that want to make an enemy of me, right? If that's the case, then I will just erase you all with a single hand." How domineering. In the distance, both the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the notionless saint looked excited. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden even wanted to throw herself into Ling Han's arms. Even if the whole world was standing in my way, I would still charge bravely forwards. Our great river tribes have existed for who knows how many millions and millions of years. How could they be erased with a single declaration from an outsider like you? The Zhao tribe chief also exclaimed loudly. At this time, their imposing manner definitely could not be weak. What they represented was not only the Zhao tribe and the Lang tribe, but all the great river tribes. They could not lose their backbone. Ling Han turned and asked, "Xiao Gu, why do the words 'the great river tribes' make me feel especially disgusted?" Xiao Gu slanted its head to one side, and called out, "Yaya," but felt that it did not express enough, so it began to imitate his words. Xiao Gu, why do the words 'the great river tribes'? Just how much was he looking down on them? Saying it once was not enough, and they actually repeated the same words a second time. The elites of the two tribes all wore cold expressions. The great river tribes had the unyielding character of the great river tribes, and definitely would not surrender because their enemies were too strong. In their ancestral teachings, there was only suicide after being defeated in battle. There was no such thing as surrendering. 9th, 11th, 17th, when the battle starts later, you three circle around the battle towards those two over there and capture them to threaten this outsider, the Zhao tribe chief communicated through divine sense. His eyes very obscurely swept over the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the notionless saint. If they could use these two people to threaten Ling Han to surrender, that naturally was the best scenario. Even if they couldn't, they would still be able to force him to retreat. If he was not willing to do even this, then they would just have those two people die alongside them. Yes. The 3-peak stage 9 rings elites nodded. The Lang tribe chief also issued a similar command. This was the only hope they saw of turning the situation around. You actually dare insult our grand Great River tribes, all of you have to die. The Lang tribe chief roared loudly, and led all the elites of the Lang tribe against Ling Han in an offensive with a wave of his hand. The Zhao tribe did not hold back either. All their elites also charged forwards. Actually, they all knew that this kind of attack was ineffective on Ling Han. Their purpose was only to allow the few sneak attackers to secretly sneak to Ling Han's rear and capture the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the notionless saint amidst the chaos of battle. Ling Han very casually flicked his fingers. Pa, 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 pa. Every flick produced a flash of sword chi, and there would be one person's head that would explode every time, his spirit and form eliminated simultaneously. Ah! The elites of the 2 tribes all released furious shouts. All these were 9 rings elites, and were the accumulated strength of the 2 tribes through countless years, yet now? They were all killed like they were helpless vegetables on the cutting block. But they were also very helpless. They could only use even more human lives to fill their gap so they could cover for the sneak attackers on their side. Very soon, they broke into smiles because there were 4 people who had circled around to Ling Han's rear, though there were also 2 that had been unfortunately killed and victory was close. Charge! The 4 elites moved, charging towards the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the notionless saint. They pounced over from 4 different directions to seal off all routes of escape that the 2 of them could take as much as possible. Boom! The frightening attack was earth-shattering. This was the battle prowess of peak stage Saint King level. Ling Han used lightning flash. Xiao, he had already appeared behind a sneak attacker. He tapped out a finger, and Pa, that person's head immediately exploded, and he became a headless corpse. With another move, he had caught up to the second sneak attacker, and did the same thing. That person was also killed. Then, it was the third, and finally Ling Han had caught up with the 4th sneak attacker. His hand grabbed the latter's neck, and lifted him up. At this time, the 4th sneak attacker was only about 9 meters away from the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. The elites of the 2 tribes only saw a blur before their eyes before they noticed 3 elites had been killed and fallen onto the ground, while the last was held in Ling Han's grip. So this is the pride of your Great River tribes? Fearing a head-on battle, and thus resort to such vile sneak attacks? Ling Han scoffed. With a toss of his right hand, he threw the sneak attacker in his grasp towards the elites of the 2 tribes. I'm giving you back. A few elites were about to stretch out their hands to catch the person when they heard the Lang tribe chief exclaim, "Dodge quickly." It was too late. A ball of light appeared from within the body of that sneak attacker. Pa! It suddenly exploded, and burst into innumerable flashes of sword light. Shio, shio, shio. The sword light filled the skies like a violent storm with howling winds and torrential rain, and killed a large portion of the elites of the 2 tribes in an instant. Those that were still alive were only the chiefs of the 2 tribes and 3 to 4 people, but all of them were covered with injuries, and were a tragic sight. Demon. The Zhao tribe chief pointed at Ling Han, his expression filled with great hatred. I am not a demon, I am simply defending myself. Who asked you all to be so aggressive? Ling Han raised his hand again, and a few more flashes of sword light slashed out. Pa, 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 pa. The remaining elites were also killed instantly. Yaya. Xiao Gu was very unhappy. Why didn't he leave a few behind for it? Ling Han smiled. He looked at Xiao Gu, but even if he had advanced into the great Saint tier, and was already invincible in the ancient realm, he still could not see through Xiao Gu. This guy's power was definitely not limited to the strength that it currently showed, but rather far surpassed it. However, it seemed as if that frightening power had been sealed off, and could not be freely used. Let's go ransack them. The 4 of them first headed to the Zhao tribe, and then went to the Lang tribe, sweeping all the treasures that the 2 tribes had accumulated over countless millions of years into their pockets. Ling Han was still not very satisfied, because there were only 5 saintly medicines in total. Don't be greedy. Even forbidden lands only have 2 to 3 saintly medicines, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden said smilingly. Ling Han nodded his head, and wrapping his arm around the heavenly phoenix divine maiden's slender waist with a smile, he said, Fonger, we can be considered to have successfully accomplished our goal. Should we have a kiss, and work hard on having a kid? Go to hell, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden spat. No matter how long she and Ling Han had been married for, she was still as bashful as she had always been. And Ling Han was only teasing her. They hadn't found the Empress and the others, so how could he possibly be in a mood to do anything else? They passed through the Lang tribe, and continued their advance. Come on, let's go back, Long Yushan said to Long Xiangyue softly in the distance. Long Xiangyue looked at Ling Han's receding back dumbly. She had a feeling that this might be their eternal parting. Chapter 1662, Natural Psychic Fruit. Ling Han's present strength was enough to overwhelm everything else. Actually, he did not like to kill, so every time they arrived at a new place, he would first ask for passage. If the other side was polite, then everything would be fine, but if the other was determined to make things difficult for them, then he would not be polite either. Wasn't it just killing people? Did they think he didn't know how to do it? When he had wiped out the elites of another 2 tribes, all the tribes upstream and downstream were intimidated. Anywhere he went, they were all incredibly respectful, and dared not speak of any destroyer. Ling Han did nothing either. These tribes could not leave the mystery realm, and would not create any trouble for the ancient realm, so there was no need for him to eliminate all of them. Finally, they had traveled to the last tribe, the Tian tribe, and the part ahead of them was close to the source of the great river. Yet it was practically a dead end ahead of them. The further upstream they went, the more essence of power there was contained in the river waters, but the more frightening the destructive power of these waters correspondingly was. As they walked further, large waves slammed into the banks. If only the slightest drop of river water from the splashes made contact, even 9 rings elites would be annihilated. Thus, even the strongest Tian tribe did not dare to go further upstream. Otherwise, that would only be seeking their own demise. And here, Ling Han finally met some familiar faces. There were a few young king tiers from the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy here, but they were not Ren Feiyun and the other big shots, and were instead rank 3 king tiers. Clearly, there was a limited number that the Star Sand Saint could protect, so if he were to bring anyone, he would bring those with greatest potential rather than those whose present cultivation levels were highest. Ling Han spotted Hong Ma, the second in the world, and Zichen Feng, and there were also a few prodigies from the Forbidden Lands. They totaled up to over 60 people. Senior Brother Ling. When these people spotted Ling Han, they all hurriedly paid their greetings. They did not know that Ling Han had become a great saint, and his battle prowess was enough to overwhelm all saints. Otherwise, even if they were old acquaintances with Ling Han, they would not dare to treat him as a peer. Ling Han nodded, and asked, "Where are the others?" "Still in the fatal land ahead," someone said. Ling Han asked them closely, and found out that ahead of the Tian tribe, the great river was incredibly frightening, and even the surrounding land had become filled with killing intent, but it was in this land that a celestial medicine had appeared. Celestial medicine. Natural psychic fruit. Even in the celestial realm, this was definitely a supremely precious medicine. Once one consumed such a celestial medicine, his physique could resonate with the heaven and earth, and form the legendary Dao physique. What kind of benefits did that have? With resonance with the heaven and earth, he himself could be claimed to be the embodiment of the regulations, so there would be no bottleneck in his cultivation. He only needed to complete the accumulation of power, and his advancement through the cultivation levels would be irresistible. Naturally, because the natural psychic fruit had different ages, this irresistible and forceful advancement rate was also limited. Some could only reach the severing mundane tier, while some could reach the dividing soul tier, and some could reach the immortal palace tier. It was said that the oldest natural psychic fruit could help one advance to the ascending origin tier, but it was never said that it could help one advance to the celestial king tier. But that was already enough. Celestials had an unlimited lifespan, so as long as there was no barrier in their comprehension of cultivation level, how many years would accumulation of power take? The Empress, the Saint Kings of the Forbidden Lands, and the others were all looking into how to enter that fatal land to obtain that celestial medicine, and the Tian tribe had attempted it for who knew how many generations, so they had long since given up. Of course, if the Empress and the others managed to successfully obtain it, they would definitely move to snatch it from them. At present, there was no conflict of interest, and the Tian tribe did not want to become hostile with so many elites either, so they allowed them to temporarily reside here. In any case, they had different cultivation systems, so there was no need to worry that these outsiders would take their resources from them. Ling Han pondered for a moment, and then decided to immediately head to that fatal land for a look. So many years had passed, and he dearly missed his wife. Of course, he missed his brother as well. He set out with the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others, and Zi Qinfeng volunteered to lead the way for them. On the way, Zi Qinfeng seemed like he wanted to say something but was hesitating, looking like he was constipated. Ling Han couldn't bear it any longer, and asked, "Do you want to say something?" "Senior brother Ling, there is something that I have to tell you, but you must definitely restrain yourself," Zi Qinfeng said. "All right." Ling Han nodded carelessly. Actually, there was nothing much that he had to be angry about. If there was anything displeasing to him, he would just directly crush it. In front of absolute power, was there any matter that could not be resolved? Zi Qinfeng nodded, and said, "When we entered this place, we also encountered a very young elite. He has already cultivated to the peak stage of Saint King tier, and even those lords were incredibly polite towards him." He paused, and said, "That young Saint King seems to admire senior sister Wan Xing very much." Ling Han laughed in spite of himself. This guy feared that he would get jealous, and pick a fight with that young Saint King? The Empress's charms were irresistible. Ling Han had long since learnt self-restraint. Otherwise, if he would get jealous every single time someone looked at his wife, then wouldn't he be dead from jealousy? He naturally had absolute trust in the Empress. No matter how many or how outstanding her pursuers were, it would be completely useless. Of course, admiring was their own business, but if someone still insisted on shamelessly pestering her even after rejection, then he would definitely not be polite. "Got it," Ling Han stated, completely not taking the matter to heart. Xiao Gu was restless. After meeting fresh people, its urge to imitate speech could not be held back. However, it recalled that Ling Han had said that imitating others was not good, so it forcefully suppressed the urge, but felt extraordinarily uncomfortable doing so. Half a day later, they finally approached that fatal land. True enough, they had not even reached the place, but they could already feel a harsh air rush out towards them, making everyone feel as if there were knives slicing at their faces. Zi Qinfeng immediately stopped and said, "Senior brother Ling, this is already my limit. I cannot take another step further." He was also considerably extraordinary, and the 5 years he had spent here had greatly improved his cultivation level. He'd advanced into the peak of the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier. Even with such a cultivation level, he could still walk until this place. As expected of a king tier. Ling Han smiled, and said, "It's all right." He set up a shield of origin power, and protected Zi Qinfeng previously. He had not used origin power at all, and was only using his physique itself to resist, yet it was sturdier than the defense of any Saint King. Zi Qinfeng was incredibly stunned. He looked dumbly at Ling Han. This feat was something that even many Saint Kings were unable to accomplish. They would only be able to set up a shield that would allow their own advance. Thus, he had completely no idea what was ahead of them all this while. "Let's go." Ling Han did not only put up a defense for Zi Qinfeng. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the notionless saint were not exempted either. As for Xiao Gu, there was no need for him to worry. This guy was incredibly strange. The four of them walked ahead, with Xiaogu bringing up the rear. It gazed around, its head slanted to one side. Occasionally, green light would be flickering in its eyes, as if there was something here that had incited a reaction from it. After slightly less than an hour's walk, they could finally see that there were more than 30 people ahead of them. The Empress. Ling Han spotted her with a single glance. Wherever she was, the Empress would be the most dazzling and outstanding, as if the moon surrounded by the stars, or the rising sun that lit up the dark night. The Empress stood proudly. Without Ling Han there, she was the proudest and most austere person, but it was this bearing that was so attractive to others. They were willing to yield under her feet, willing to surrender their all for her. There was a young man standing at her side, only 3 feet away, and the other saints, including the Star Sand Saint, were around 9 meters away. Thus, even though the two of them were obviously not standing very close to each other, they seemed like a pair. As if she had sensed his presence, the Empress suddenly turned around. Suddenly, an overjoyed smile appeared on her exquisite face. With a leap, she pounced into Ling Han's arms. The young man standing at her side immediately revealed a menacing expression. Chapter 1663, Another Visitor from the Celestial Realm. Ling Han also embraced the Empress's slender waist tightly, going around in a few circles with her in his arms, and only then did he kiss her hard. Having been parted for 8 years, he missed her very much. The Empress also responded passionately, her icy pride completely dispersed, and she had become a bewitching demoness that could melt anyone with her hot passion. Every inch of her was exuding so much seduction that no one could bear it. Xiaogu watched from one side, its head slanted to one side. It couldn't help but approach, and copied Ling Han's action in asking for a hug. Stop, stop, stop. This is my wife, don't copy what I do. Ling Han hurriedly stopped him. Xiaogu presently did not just like imitating speech, it was beginning to imitate even actions. Usually, it was fine, but when it concerned his wife, ho, forget about it. Xiaogu was confused, and called out, Yaya, feeling a bit despondent. Who is he? The Empress asked curiously. Why did he look exactly like Ling Han? We'll talk about it in future. Ling Han switched to holding the Empress's hand, and walked towards the Star Sand Saint. Smiling, he asked, Everyone, have you discovered anything? The Star Sand Saint, the Tranquil Heart Saint, and the other 10 saints of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy were all here. They all shook their heads with a grimace, and replied, The celestial medicine is just in front of us, but we can't get hold of it. This is really depressing. Woof, little Han, pay your greetings quickly now that you have seen me. The large black dog ran over. It looked at Xiaogu, yet all of a sudden, all the black fur on its body bristled. Monster. It jumped up, baring its teeth. Monster. Xiaogu thought it was fun, and copied it. You're the monster here. The large black dog was furious. You're the monster here. Xiaogu was copying him with great pleasure. Don't copy my words. Don't copy my words. You are an idiot that doesn't know how to talk. You are an idiot that doesn't know how to talk. Whatever the large black dog said, Xiaogu would imitate him word for word. No matter how the large black dog changed the speed of speech, sometimes quick and sometimes slow, Xiaogu would always manage to imitate him without any change. Soon enough, the large black dog suffered a breakdown. He sprawled out on the ground, his ears drooping. Whatever he didn't hear would not make him mad. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. It was rare to see the large black dog at a disadvantage. This was really bringing satisfaction for everyone. Yaya. Meanwhile, Xiaogu smiled dumbly. So you are Ling Han? The young Saint King from before walked over. He was really very young, only a few tens of thousands years old, but not only had he advanced into the Genesis tier, he had also reached the peak of the consummate level of the Genesis tier. Ling Han's eyes swept over him, and was startled slightly because he could sense an aura that was different from other Saint Kings on this young Saint King. Consummate regulations. Like Han Chi, he had also come from the celestial realm. No wonder he had managed to become a peak stage Saint King at such a young age. Being nurtured with the resources of the celestial realm, how could he not advance at such a fast pace? However, compared with Hunyo, he was completely no match. In a mere 5 years, Hunyo was already in the Genesis tier. I am Ling Han, how should I address you? Ling Han looked at the other man. Pang Zhen, the young Saint King replied, his face bearing an expression of pride. This was natural. He had come from the celestial realm, and everyone here added together was not as precious as a single finger of his. If it was not for the fact that there was a celestial medicine here, as well as an exquisitely beautiful empress, how could he possibly have wasted 5 years' time here? Ling Han only gave an "oh," and ignored him after. Why you? Pang Zhen couldn't help but feel angered. What kind of attitude was that? He was only a mere great saint, and actually dared put on airs in front of him. Hang on. Pang Zhen's heart shuddered. Such a young great saint. He could no longer see through Ling Han, but was sure that his flame of life had been burning for only 1,000 years at most. The mere ancient realm actually had such a freak? He involuntarily glanced at the Empress. This exquisite beauty had also reached the peak stage of the medium Saint tier, and her battle prowess was even comparable to the peak stage of Saint King tier. What was going on with the ancient realm? Was it specialized in producing freaks? Friend Ling. The Saint Kings from the various forbidden lands also greeted Ling Han. When they realized that Ling Han's cultivation level had already advanced into the Great Saint tier, they were both astonished and pleased. Their joy was derived from the fact that they would soon be entering into the celestial realm, and their astonishment came from the fact that Ling Han had already reached such heights when only a few years had passed. They felt like they were living in a dream. Ling Han nodded, and did not become arrogant just because he was capable of overwhelming all elites. He smiled and greeted the Saint Kings. Then, he turned and looked ahead, and asked, "Can't you pluck that celestial medicine?" Completely impossible. A young man walked over, his tone aged and experienced. You are? Ling Han looked at him. Fuck, I am the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire. The youth immediately jumped up and shouted in displeasure. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "We haven't seen each other for a few years, you've grown up." Tui, don't say it in such a disgusting way. When I was moving unhindered in the world before, who knows where your ancestors were still drinking milk, the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire exclaimed in displeasure. Why can't it be done? Ling Han returned to the previous topic of conversation. The regulations here are too frightening, they are not something that can be matched by Genesis tier. The heavenly emperor of thunder and fire became serious again. It is still all right now, but there would be violent hurricanes of regulations streaking out at any time. Going by my estimation, even immortal palace tiers could possibly be plundered to death by these winds. Only now did Ling Han really get a shock. Immortal palace tiers were already standing on the 3rd tier in the celestial realm, and above that would be ascending origin tier and celestial king tier. If this kind of regulations hurricane could plunder immortal palace tiers to death, then the highest level of power here would at least have to be ascending origin tier. Within a banished ancient land, there actually appeared power on the level of ascending origin tier at least. This was inconceivable. On the other side, Pang Zhen's expression was dark, and he felt an urge to commit murder. He was a prodigy of the celestial realm, but look at the situation now. So many people were actually gathering around Ling Han, and even the woman that he had his eye on had thrown herself into Ling Han's arms. Humph, these people only wanted to enter into the celestial realm, and that was why they were fawning so much on this young man. A thought flashed in Pang Zhen's head. He could release some information at an appropriate time. Not only was he capable of opening the doors to the celestial realm, he himself was even the descendant of a great force of the celestial realm. You mere Genesis tiers would only be ants after entering into the celestial realm, so how would you be able to survive without depending on the backing of a great force? However, he did not dare take anyone into the celestial realm. This was an ironclad rule of the celestial realm. If it was discovered that anyone had secretly brought anyone into the celestial realm, there would be a celestial king-level force that would arrive personally and annihilate the entire clan. Something like that had happened in the past. In an ascending origin tier-level force, there was a junior that had entered into the ancient realm for training, and developed an ill-fated relationship. He was cruel, and abandoned the woman, only bringing his own child into the celestial realm, but what was the result? In a moment of carelessness, it was discovered that the child was born in the ancient realm, and it resulted in the entire force being eliminated overnight. That was an ascending origin tier-level force. Thus, he would only use the celestial realm as a pretense at most, and compete with Ling Han in popularity, but to actually bring anyone into the celestial realm? Ho ho, he would not dare do such a thing even if they beheaded him. This bunch of country bumpkins had absolutely no idea how strict the celestial realm was about the matter of illegal immigration. Chapter 1664, Source of the Great River. Natural Psychic Fruit. The heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire licked his lips. If it is capable of boosting cultivation up to ascending origin tier, then that would be a supreme precious treasure to even me. Grandpa dogs, it's all grandpa dogs. The large black dog jumped out. You damn kid, don't you know how to respect your elders and betters? I have not seen any betters, but I do see a shameless old dog. The heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire laughed mockingly. You dare insult me? Woof. The large black dog immediately broke into a fight with the heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire. Ling Han ignored this pair of jokers. He looked ahead. There was a black aura rising from the land. It was very calm, and a plant was presently growing about 10 miles ahead of them, exuding a shimmering light of Tao. Natural psychic fruit, the embodiment of the regulations of heaven and earth. In theory, its value surpassed any other kind of celestial medicines. Of course, if you were unlucky, and encountered one that was not mature enough, and could only boost your cultivation to severing mundane tier, you could only cry. Yaya. Xiao Gu also looked ahead, but it was not looking at the natural psychic fruit, but rather a farther area. In truth, after 100 miles, even the vision of the saints would start to fail them. They would only be able to see gusts of black chi rising, whereas the other areas were all obscure. As it watched, Xiao Gu's expression involuntarily changed. Green light appeared from its eyes again, and it revealed an expression of fury. Suddenly, it loudly roared, Yaya. Then, it charged out. Ling Han didn't manage to stop it in time. He wanted to chase after it, but realized that the black aura had become as sharp as blades in the process of running, and posed a frightening threat to him. He could not execute the full effects of even the extreme speed of lightning flash. He did not manage to stop it, and Xiao Gu had already charged to a very far spot like a gust of wind. This guy should not have gone off to die. Ling Han slowly retreated. In this place, his physique was useless as well because even immortal palace tiers could be killed, so how could his merely half-star pseudo-divine metal physique be enough? Gasp! All the Saint Kings exclaimed in shock because Xiao Gu had already rushed 6 to 7 miles ahead, far exceeding their limits. This guy could possibly pluck the celestial medicine. Everyone was greatly pleased. As long as the celestial medicine could be plucked, then they would have hopes of snatching it. Otherwise, they could only stay here and watch helplessly. Not good. However, the masses soon cried out. Xiao Gu's body was crumbling, completely unable to bear the damage caused by this fatal land. Ling Han, meanwhile, was not too worried. This body was only formed by Xiao Gu. Its true form was a bone. As long as its true form was not destroyed, it could easily form another body again. Pa, pa, pa. Xiao Gu's flesh and blood fell piece by piece, and very soon there was only a skeleton left behind, yet it was still running swiftly forwards. It had already arrived at the side of the celestial medicine. But contrary to everyone's expectations, Xiao Gu did not stop, and continued running forwards at a quick pace. Everyone was baffled. You have sacrificed so much, yet actually did not pluck the celestial medicine right in front of you. Have you gone blind? Xiao Gu was still running. Its bones were falling off one after another, and finally there was only one left, and that was its true form, which was exuding a shimmering green light. It rushed into that boundless area of black aura. The moment the distance of 100 miles was surpassed by it, no one was capable of catching sight of Xiao Gu. It had completely disappeared without a trace. Everyone exchanged looks, their expressions completely dumbfounded. What the hell is this? Yet Ling Han came up with a thought. Xiao Gu was completely incompatible with the natives here, and the fundamental reason was the cultivation system of the natives here, and all this originated from the Great River. To be exact, it was the source of the Great River. And now, Xiao Gu was charging towards it. No one could see what happened after that, and they could only wait. After 3 days, they saw a green light flickering in the distance. Xiao Gu very quickly appeared. Its whole body was encircled with green light. Of course, it was still just a bone, and charged out of the black aura at a run. It stopped in front of Ling Han, and reformed flesh and blood. Then, it released a feeble yaya, and passed out. Had Xiao Gu gone to the source of the Great River? If yes, what had it encountered there? It seemed to have gone through a bloody battle, and sustained very severe injuries. It looked completely exhausted. Everyone was curious, but Xiao Gu had not regained consciousness, so there was no one for them to ask. Ling Han voiced a question to Small Tower, and asked, "Do you know what's going on here?" Small Tower was silent for a moment before answering, "This is a completely new cultivation system. I, too, have never heard of it. Different cultivation systems should correspond to a different natural environment. This is too bizarre. Can you use the power of the Black Tower to help me enter into this area?" Ling Han asked again. "If you think that you've lived long enough, you can give it a try," Small Tower said, as sharp-tongued as it had always been. Ling Han naturally would not take it to heart. Otherwise, he would have long since died of fury. He then asked, "Then what about Xiao Gu? Can you distinguish its origins?" Again, Small Tower didn't reply right away, and finally said, "I have some guesses. It should be related to a celestial king, but as for the details, I am not very sure either. After all, I have not completely recovered." Related to a celestial king. Ling Han was stunned, but immediately nodded. The heavenly emperor of thunder and fire had said that this black aura was capable of even killing immortal palace tiers, so it was very possible that it could be battle prowess on the level of celestial king tier. Then, seeing as Xiao Gu was able to enter and return from it, it could be imagined that it had some relation with a celestial king. 3 days later, Xiao Gu regained consciousness. Yaya. It seemed to have completely forgotten the matter of its previous injuries, and called out happily, looking very energetic. This recovery ability was really quite incredible. "Xiao Gu, what did you see inside?" Ling Han asked. Xiao Gu said Yaya for a while. It only knew how to imitate speech, and the only phrase it could say independently was Yaya. After making signs and gesturing for a long time, there was still no conclusion, which made everyone extremely anxious. "I really want to bite this guy," the large black dog muttered, but he was only grumbling. He definitely did not dare do such a thing. His eyes were very sharp, and he could tell how extraordinary Xiao Gu was. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, "Xiao Gu, do you know how to do this?" He plucked out a portion of his memories, and turned it into images. "Yaya." Xiao Gu immediately nodded. It also drew out a finger, and a memory image immediately appeared. Fast forward a bit. Fast forward a bit. Very quickly, the scene of Xiao Gu charging into the black aura appeared. Ling Han did not ask it to fast forward again, but was rather watching with full concentration. The others were also the same. They were almost killed by their curiosity. What kind of secret was actually hidden within this black aura? And what was there at the source of the great river? Why was it that a river could nurture so many elites, and a completely different cultivation system had even appeared? They saw that as Xiao Gu charged into the black aura, there was very quickly only a bone left, and it was releasing green light, which resisted the corrosive ability of the black aura. It charged forwards. However, Xiao Gu's speed was also gradually slowing. This black aura exerted a tremendous pressure on it. When even Xiao Gu could no longer bear it, and could only turn back, the great river had reached its source, and a massive black shadow appeared ahead. That was a corpse. Chapter 1665, Hand over the Celestial Medicine. This was a giant that looked human, yet had two pairs of eyes, with one pair slightly above and the other slightly below, yet they were practically overlapping each other. His skin was not dark at all. In truth, it was golden, like metal, but there were multiple black patterns on his golden skin, and any single one of them seemed capable of suppressing all the heavens. That endless black aura was emanating precisely from his body, and turned into that surging great river, and there was still blood flowing out of his body. This became the essence substance within the great river. The source of cultivation of this mystery realm was actually a corpse. This was too shocking. Merely drinking the river's waters, having contact with a slight bit of the martial intent of this giant, had led to the formation of a completely new cultivation system. And in this place, just how many years had it existed? Where there were official records, they had reached as far back as hundreds of billions of years. At least 100 billion years, but there was still blood flowing from this giant. Judging by the look of things, it seemed as if there would be no difficulty for it to continue flowing for another 100 billion years. Next, it was Xiao Gu running back, which did not have any meaning. Everyone was speechless, and even Pang Zhen was stunned. He had completely not thought that such an astonishing thing would appear here. He had to report this to the clan. Perhaps a celestial king had died here. The cultivation technique of a celestial king. His eyes immediately widened. If they could obtain a celestial king cultivation technique, the Pang clan would definitely skyrocket from a 2-star force to 3 stars, 4 stars, or even until 5 stars, and become a celestial king level force. Ling Han nodded, and asked, Xiao Gu, can you take that medicine back? He pointed at the natural psychic fruit. Yeah. Xiao Gu did not say another word, and immediately broke into a run. It dug out the natural psychic fruit along with a large portion of dirt, and then ran back to Ling Han's side, handing him the celestial medicine as if it was presenting him a treasure. Everyone saw this, and almost called out, idiot. That was celestial medicine. Celestial medicine. You actually gave it to someone else? Are you foolish to the extreme, not knowing the value of a celestial medicine, or are you so generous? Rich guy, let's be friends too. Hand over the celestial medicine. Pang Zhen suddenly declared, his eyes focused on Ling Han. Once he exited this mystery realm, he would return to the celestial realm and report this matter to the elders of the clan, but before that, he definitely had to get hold of this celestial medicine. If he waited until the great elites of the clan entered into the ancient realm, then even if the natural psychic fruit had not been consumed by Ling Han, it would not fall into his hands either. It would definitely be taken by the great elites of the clan. What if they could use this to break through to the ascending origin tier? No matter how he saw it, it would not be he that would lay hands on it. But it was a different case now. He only had to obtain this celestial medicine, then kill everyone else to prevent them from leaking out the truth, and who would know that he had obtained a celestial medicine? To say the least, even if he did not kill everyone, and only consumed the celestial medicine, the clan would only be able to accept it tacitly and earnestly nurture him. Thus, he immediately became hostile. That's right, hand it over, it's mine. The large black dog jumped up to join in the excitement. You should give it to me. The heavenly emperor of thunder and fire was unwilling to take a step back either. With this man and dog interrupting, it instantly decreased the threatening effect of Pang Zhen's words sharply, making it seem as if he was joking. Pang Zhen couldn't help but humph coldly, and pressed out a hand in the direction of the large black dog and the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire. Both of you, shut up. The large black dog and the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire hurriedly dodged in a flash. They had just advanced into the medium Saint tier, and were not capable of resisting a peak stage Saint King yet, especially when this Saint King had simultaneously grasped the regulations of 2 realms, and had stronger battle prowess. Hand it over. Pang Zhen shouted again, and began an offensive at Ling Han. You've gone too far. The Blue Feather Saint King and the other elites made their moves. Previously, they had already stood on the same side as Ling Han, and now they would naturally support Ling Han fully as well. Just a bunch of ants, you really think that you all can be my equals? Pang Zhen scoffed. Pang, pang, pang. He threw out a few punches, and forced the Blue Feather Saint King and the others to retreat. Even in a battle of 1 against 9, he had the upper hand. It was not that he was more freakishly talented, but rather that the regulations he had grasped were more complete, so he naturally had an advantage in terms of battle prowess. The Blue Feather Saint King and the others were shocked. Though Pang Zhen had made a move before, he clearly had not used his full power. So his true strength was actually so impressive. Pang Zhen took another step forwards, yet saw that supremely graceful empress was standing in front of him, looking down on him in an incredibly proud manner, and spat out one word. Scram. He humphed. Though the empress was extremely beautiful, it was destined that he could not bring her back to the celestial realm, and could only play around with her here. Now that this thought had risen in his mind, he had lost his patience, and did not bother to use any courting skills on her. This was also due to Ling Han's appearance, which allowed him to realize that his pursuit of her could not possibly be successful. He could take this beauty for his own, and enjoy her as much as possible before he broke through to the Severing Mundane tier. Otherwise, after he became a Severing Mundane tier, he would not be able to so easily descend into the ancient realm anymore. Short of the divine essence of immortality, his lifespan would shorten not too long after, and he would no longer have any hope of reaching immortality in this lifetime. Yuan Xing, you are not a match for me, stand aside, he said calmly, his tone filled with incredibly powerful self-confidence. You are courting death. The Empress moved. All her 9 doppelgangers appeared, each using different celestial techniques. This was much more awesome than the immovable deity metal body mystical power. Ling Han could only have another 4 arms, at most, yet she had directly produced another 9 bodies, which did not have the slightest difference from the main body. How could a celestial king technique not be awesome? Boom, boom, boom. Various celestial techniques barraged Pang Zhen like a tsunami that was intent on submerging him. Pang Zhen was stunned by the Empress's power, but was completely unafraid of battling fiercely with the Empress. He was the big shot among Genesis tier big shots, so he naturally would not be afraid of a mere medium saint. But even with the advantage of 2 minor levels, he only had a slight advantage. Firstly, this was because the Empress had cultivated a celestial king technique, so her battle prowess far surpassed her peers, and secondly, she had cultivated to the true pinnacle level in the Eternal River tier, possessing a whole 10 million stars, and this further increased her ability to overwhelm all her equals. These 2 factors added together allowed her to fight Pang Zhen and not be defeated. But it was only not being defeated. However, this already caused the eyes of the Blue Feather Saint King and the others to pop out in shock. Previously, they'd only known that the Empress was very strong, capable of being their equal, but had completely not imagined that she had already surpassed them. It couldn't be, right? They were unable to take a single strike from Pang Zhen, yet the Empress could stand firm against him, and was only at a slight disadvantage. How much clearer could this make things for them? You are indeed very strong, but definitely not my match. Pang Zhen said coldly. After all, there was the advantage of 2 minor levels. The Empress didn't bother to reply. Her battle prowess was indeed slightly inferior, but don't forget that her 10 bodies could distribute the attack power among themselves, and this was equivalent to a further increase of a single star of battle prowess. She might not be able to win this battle, but it was not definite that she would lose, either. "Wife, allow me," Ling Han said with a smile. Whatever had to do with violence and force, just hand it over to him. The Empress only had to stay beautiful and proud. Chapter 1666, Suffering the Consequences of His Own Actions. The Empress immediately stopped, turned around, and smiled beautifully at Ling Han. It was like 10 million flowers had bloomed at the same time, indescribably beautiful. Ling Han couldn't help but take a step forwards, wrapping his arms around the Empress's slender waist, and planted a kiss on her red lips. The Empress responded passionately, her black locks cascading down like a waterfall. "Those who make a public display of affection will die very fast," the large black dog mumbled. "Damn couple," the heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire remarked next. "Woof, you dare insult your grandpa dog?" The large black dog immediately jumped up, and aimed a bite at the heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire. Pang Zhen's face was livid. "Are you guys done yet?" Ling Han paid him no regard at all, and merely kissed his beautiful wife deeply. "Damn it!" Pang Zhen roared loudly, leaping out and stretching out a hand to grab Ling Han. He was going to kill this man. But Ling Han did not even raise his head, and very casually flicked out a finger. Suddenly, a flash of sword chi swept out, dazzling the skies. Yet Pang Zhen's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly channeled his full power into defense. Wang, multiple streaks of golden light surged out of his body, forming a shield in front of him, and there was shockingly the character, Pang, on the shield. Pang, the sword chi landed on the shield, and this shield was immediately sliced in half. The might of the sword chi did not decrease, and continued to slash out. With a pu, there was a spurt of blood from Pang Zhen's chest. His whole person had been forced back about 50 meters, his feet creating very deep grooves in the ground, and only then did he stop. Wah! He spat out a mouthful of blood, his face turning completely pale at first before flushing red. He looked at Ling Han in shock, completely unable to believe what had just happened. He was just a great saint, yet could actually defeat him so easily. This was too unjust. Wait, could it be? His heart involuntarily shuddered. So this young man had cultivated 10 million stars before breaking through to the Genesis tier? Otherwise, with a gap of more than a minor level, there was definitely no possible way he could have been defeated, and so horribly at that. Wait, there was that woman as well. He turned towards the Empress again. This exquisite beauty must have also cultivated 10 million stars before breaking through to the Genesis tier, and that was why she was strong enough to oppose him. And this scene also caused the Blue Feather Saint King and the others to kneel down in astonishment. Indeed, it was just as they had predicted. Once Ling Han advanced into the Great Saint tier, he would be frighteningly strong. Just ask, who could possibly match him in the entire ancient realm? Only now did Ling Han raise his head. The Empress's beautiful face bore a red blush, and was so incredibly dazzling that even those saints felt their hearts throb wildly, though all of them maintained a solemn expression, not daring to show the slightest bit of their emotions. You had to be joking. Ling Han presently was already strong enough to kill anyone in his way. Who dared to have ideas about his woman? Were they tired of living? Moreover, they were still hoping that Ling Han could bring them into the celestial realm. Pang Zhen gritted his teeth. The celestial medicine was too attractive, so he was not satisfied to just leave like that. He suddenly drew out a jade pendant, and declared, "If you don't want to die, hand over the celestial medicine obediently. Otherwise, when I burst this forbidden tool, all of you will have to die." He was not just throwing around threats here. This jade pendant had been bestowed on him by his elders, and after bursting, it could release a terrifying power on the level of pseudo-severing mundane tier. No matter even if you were a Saint King, in front of the power of a pseudo-severing mundane tier, your only fate would be being turned into ashes. Oh, what item is that? Ling Han asked, very intrigued. Pang Zhen felt like he was about to go crazy. Was this the time to be curious what item this was? Why was it so difficult to communicate with this person? He exclaimed, "Don't force me. This is a forbidden tool, and possesses boundless might. All those below the severing mundane tier will die. Just because you say it possesses boundless might, it does? I don't believe it." Ling Han shook his head. Fuck. A muscle twitched in Pang Zhen's cheek. He really did not want to use this forbidden tool, because when this attack surged out, not only Ling Han would die, even the Empress would also die. He slightly hated to do it. He would really be unable to find another woman of such exquisite beauty. Ling Han, the Blue Feather Saint King and the others called out. Judging by the look of Pang Zhen, he did not seem like he was just pulling a bluff. If you have the guts, then just burst it. Yet Ling Han was still provoking Pang Zhen. Pang Zhen finally could no longer bear it. In any case, if he could not kill Ling Han, he could not possibly obtain the Empress either. Since that was the case, if he couldn't obtain her, then no one should have her either. Suddenly, he burst the jade pendant. Banish. Ling Han pressed out a hand, and Pang Zhen's whole person instantly disappeared. But it was only a moment. Boom, a frightening storm of energy suddenly appeared out of nowhere, sweeping out in all directions. However, it was only peak stage Saint King in power at most, and was completely insufficient to deal a fatal strike against them. It was very simple. Pang Zhen and that forbidden tool had been banished together, but because the might that forbidden tool had released was too frightening, it had burst out even when the banishment period had not ended, but it was also because of this that a large amount of the power had been used on exploding the void, causing the might of the forbidden tool to be decreased greatly. Instead, it was Pang Zhen who suffered. At first, it was impossible that he would also be affected by the might of the forbidden tool, because he was in the center. However, who asked him to be banished with it together into a sealed-off space? The violent energy endlessly crashed and ricocheted in the space, and naturally struck him fatally first. And now, there was really not the slightest bit left of him. He had suffered the consequences of his own actions. The Blue Feather Saint King and the others were all gaping with shock. The matter was resolved just like that? Ling Han smiled slightly, and said, "Now that we're done, let's pack up and leave. Everyone, it's about time that we can return." The Saint Kings all nodded in agreement blankly, and felt that everything was so surreal. Only after a long time had passed did they return to their senses. Since Ling Han had become a great saint, that meant that they would be able to enter into the celestial realm. They all expressed the desire to return to their own forbidden lands and make some preparations, then immediately bring all their clansmen to seek out Ling Han again. Meanwhile, Ling Han said there was no rush. He would still stay in the ancient realm for at least 10 years. Why? He was going to freeload off the heavenly tribulation of others. He wanted to obtain a great volume of heavenly tribulation fluid before he left. Everyone returned. Though the Tian tribe knew that the celestial medicine had already been plucked, they did not speak a word of it. With the reputation Ling Han had established through his martial feats, who would dare covet something that had already entered his pocket? 2 days later, all the outsiders left the Tian tribe, and came to the Yuan tribe where they had first arrived. As long as they had not reached the peak stage of the Saint King tier, they could cultivate here, and it was definitely capable of boosting their cultivation rate a good few times. All the Saint Kings left. They had to return as soon as possible to make their preparations for entering the celestial realm. Ling Han also left. He was going to go to the Great Ling Empire, and choose a few people to bring into the celestial realm. Before he left, he warned everyone not to be in a rush to break through. No matter what, they had to wait until he returned. In any case, with his current speed, a return trip would only take 2 years at most. Everyone naturally agreed, and Ling Han set off. This time, he only brought the Empress with him because the Empress had reached the peak stage of the medium saint tier, and did not need to further increase her origin power, and only needed comprehension of cultivation level, so she needed the help of the reincarnation tree. The Empress went into seclusion for comprehension inside the Black Tower, while Ling Han headed towards the Great Ling Empire, stepping on the golden pathway. This would be his final trip to the Great Ling Empire. If he ever came back, it would definitely be when he returned from the celestial realm. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.